News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to
President-elect Donald Trump has chosen former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi to be his U.S. Attorney General. Bondi is a deeply experienced prosecutor. She was also on Trump's legal team during his first impeachment trial in the Senate. Bondi was tapped after Trump's first choice, former Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz, dropped out. Gaetz has been investigated by the House Ethics Committee on allegations of sexual misconduct, allegations he denies. Some lawmakers have called on the committee to release the findings. Illinois Democratic Congressman Sean Casten says in years past, the committee has continued investigating members who resigned and sometimes released its findings.
No workplace would allow that information to be swept under the rug simply because someone resigned for office.
The House Ethics Committee is scheduled to meet December 5th to further discuss the issue. Mexico's president says her government is preparing for Donald Trump to follow through on his pledge to carry out mass deportations from the U.S. once he returns to the White House. From member station KJZZ, Nina Kravinsky has more.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says her country is prepared to receive deportees if there are mass expulsions next year. But she says her first step is to show the incoming administration that immigrants from her country are an important part of the U.S. economy, and said that immigrants shouldn't be treated as criminals. Trump has promised deportation starting at the beginning of his new administration in January. He confirmed this week that he plans to declare a national emergency and use the military to carry out those deportations. According to the Pew Research Center, there are around 4 million unauthorized immigrants from Mexico in the U.S. For NPR News, I'm Nina Kravinsky in Hermosillo, Mexico.
The death toll in Gaza from Israel's war against Hamas has now surpassed 44,000 people. The Gaza Ministry of Health says more than half are women and children. In northern Gaza, dozens of people were killed in Israeli airstrikes in the last 24 hours. There's little help for wounded victims because the main hospital there hardly functions. NPR's Anas Baba interviewed a health worker in the hospital, and NPR's Ruth Sherlock prepared this report.
Dr. Eid Sabah in Kamal Adwan Hospital in North Gaza says the wounded arrive on animal carts. The hospital's ambulances have been destroyed. And once in the hospital, there's often little the doctors can do to help. A month ago, Israeli soldiers entered the hospital grounds and destroyed many of the medical supplies, he says. And the anaesthetists have been arrested. Lives that would have been saved in normal circumstances, he says, don't make it now. The Israeli military did not respond to NPR's request for comment. Ruth Sherlock, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
You're listening to NPR News.
Good morning with the latest from the GBH Newsroom. I'm Henry Santoro. MIT and Brandeis are now among the higher ed schools offering free tuition for less wealthy students. USA Today reports that at MIT, tuition will be waived for students whose families earn less than $200,000 per year, and students at MIT from families earning less than $100,000 won't have to pay for housing as well as some other fees. Meanwhile, over at Brandeis, the college will waive tuition for students whose families make less than $75,000 per year, and tuition will be cut in half for students whose families make less than $200,000 per year. ACLU of Massachusetts says it's prepared to challenge the Trump administration when it comes to the mass deportation of undocumented immigrants. Carol Rose is head of the Massachusetts ACLU. She says her organization is preparing tools to fight the administration, and she says that state and local leaders and everyday citizens have the ability to push back.
If Trump wants to come in and try to deport 1 million people, they can't do that. There aren't enough ICE law enforcement officers. So they're going to try to do things like, try to get local police to collaborate with them or try to get people to turn in their neighbors. So we can just say, we're not going to do that.
Governor Maura Healey has said that state police will not assist when it comes to mass deportations, and Boston Mayor Michelle Wu has made similar comments about the Boston Police Department. Celtics on the road tonight. They're playing the Washington Wizards, and the Harvard-Yale football game is tomorrow in Alston. 47 degrees under a partly cloudy sky right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Charles Schwab, offering investors choices like full-service wealth management, advice, investing, and trading on thinkorswim. Learn more at schwab.com. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Welcome to Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. I am Marjorie Egan. I'm joined with former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral. Hello again, Andrea. Thank you for coming in.
Hello, Marjorie. Happy to be here.
Happy to be with you as well. Jim Browdy is recuperating from COVID. The poor guy. We feel very bad for him. He doesn't feel too good. Anyway, Governor Deval Patrick will join us on Zoom in about a half hour. He's going to talk about this race, and he was a longtime employee of the Department of Justice. He was a big deal there. He ran the Civil Rights Division, and he was Andrea's boss. That's right. Did you get along with Governor Patrick?
Yes,
Not going to have any.
did.
Okay, we just want to make sure. Make sure. Okay.
Well, there would be it's kind of a bad time to ask now, right, Marjorie?
It's too late, Andrea. Too late to settle any old scores. We can't do it today. Okay, but he's going to be here on Zoom. We're going to talk about him, of course, about what the Democrats should do next. And Tuesday, we're going to be back at the library for another hour of Ask the Attorney General with Attorney General Andrea Campbell. She'll take our questions and yours. But right now, we're going to talk about teacher strikes. Up on the North Shore, 3 school systems are closed while teachers strike for better working conditions. They're in Beverly, Gloucester, and Marblehead. And they're really trying to get more money for their lowest paid educators, often paraprofessionals who don't make very much money, sometimes under $40,000 a year. Teachers' strikes are illegal under the state constitution governing public employee unions. A county judge has ruled that he would waive the impending fees against the union if they agree to go back to the classroom on Monday. The Boston Globe editorialized that they should up the fees. They can be as high as $50,000. They can go even higher than that for every day that the strike continues. Anyway, the whole thing is kind of a mess. So we're looking for what you think about this at 877-301-8970 if you want to call us or text us. Are you a parent of school-age kids up in Beverly, Gloucester, or Marblehead who are stretched thin? Are you a kid, a student in one of those towns who are kind of getting tired of being on your computer, missing your classmates, missing your activities? Is this reminding you of the pandemic when you were home for many, many months? And maybe you are a teacher up there or a paraprofessional up there who's been on the picket line, wants to talk about what you're seeing on the ground and what you're hoping for to get some kind of resolution here before Thanksgiving. The number again is 877-301-8970. You can also weigh in. We've talked about this when the Newton teachers went on strike, about whether our legal system should be more accommodating of strikes like these, or whether they should remain what they are right now, illegal. 877-301-8970. 2 weeks is a long time.
2 weeks is definitely a long time. And, part of this also is you can sort of see the ambivalence around the fact is that strikes are illegal, right? So invariably the district leaders will go to court and fines will be imposed. But here you see, the Essex Superior Court judge saying, if you go back to work on Monday, then we won't have the fines, which would be, by my calculation, somewhere around $260,000 at this point, because it's $50,000 for the first day. It goes up $10,000 every single day. But there is this notion, especially in a state like Massachusetts, that if you're in a union, that you have a right to a work stoppage. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think you see judges sort of saying, yes, I'm imposing the fines, but if you stop striking, then you won't have to pay the fines. And the other side of that is people say, well, if you don't ever impose the fines, aren't you basically asking for a strike in bad faith, not necessarily one in good faith, because they know that they will never have to pay the fines? And to your point, it's a mess. There are lots of different sides to this. And I kind of get I thought it was interesting that James Vosnes in the Globe has a piece about this. Interesting that the Essex Superior Court judge last Wednesday asked the attorney for the Beverly and Marblehead school committees whether or not these strikes were coordinated, whether or not it was the unions coordinating them. Because here you have Beverly, Gloucester, and Marblehead, three very different jurisdictions. I mean, Beverly isn't Gloucester and Gloucester isn't Marblehead. And while they're asking for certain things, certain demands are common among most or all of them, they're very different jurisdictions with different budgets, and so it's a legitimate question to ask.
The number's 877-301-8970. Our colleague, Tori Bedford, a GBH News reporter, went out and talked to a Marblehead mother, Diane Anello, who had been swapping childcare duties. That's what you end up doing, right? You all get together and see which parent can take care of which kids on which days. Exactly. Yeah. This poor mother was looking after 5 kids at the North Shore Mall in Peabody, and here's what she had to say about the strike.
I think it definitely stirs a lot of those feelings of the pandemic. Now that it's dragged out to 2 weeks, it's just stirring a lot of emotions for a lot of parents. Every time you get that 6 p.m. email, you're like, okay, I'm not surprised, but a punch in the gut.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we went through this. We had the Newton strike, we had the Brookline strike, we had the Andover strike. There's been a lot of striking by teachers, even though it's illegal. And I don't know what you tell the kids about it's illegal, but we're doing it anyway. But they're getting the fines. But you heard about people really in a mess with their work because you can't, even if you're working from home part of the time, you try to work at home with a bunch of 7-year-old boys in your house or 5-year-old kids or even teenagers. It's hard to do that.
And the kids are falling behind. I mean, that's the other problem, is that these are days that they're going to have to make up, which means that when parents have scheduled vacation time for the holidays or any other kind of vacation, they can't because the kids are going to have to be in school making up the days.
877-301-89 is the phone number. We're getting some texts. This is from an anonymous teacher. She says she empathizes with both sides, but I'm just super uncomfortable with the children being used as ammunition. It's like being caught in the middle of a nasty divorce. That's true too. I mean, you generally, people really like their kids' teachers, especially in elementary school, because they get friendly with, they go pick up the kids, they see the teachers a lot like that. But then on the other hand, if your boss is on your back and you are unable to find some place to dump your kid, I shouldn't say dump your kid, have someone babysit for your child. I dumped my children. I don't want to say other people dump their children, but you feel kind of caught between what the teachers need and the paraprofessionals need and what you need from work.
And I don't think either side looks at it as using children as ammunition. But they are absolutely, I don't want to use the term collateral damage because they're not collateral, they're intrinsic, but they are the damage that is felt in a situation like this. Dan from New Bedford says, what incentive does management have to compromise, make the right to strike legal, and they will happen even less likely? Yeah. I think he means the strikes will happen less frequently if you make the right to strike legal.
This parent, in a letter filed in Middlesex Superior Court, did think that the kids were using as collateral damages. She thinks that the unions are using the kids as collateral damages.
Well, there were really hard feelings that come as a result of this. Wasn't it, who was it, the mayor of, what mayor was it that got caught making an obscene gesture toward the school? Gloucester. Yeah, I mean, and he said, I let my feelings get the better of me. But these are serious feelings among adults that have reverberations for the lives and education of children.
We've got Steve calling on the road. What do you think, Steve?
Hi, Steve.
Hi. I have a person in Beverly in the system, and they just can't go back to school Monday without a written contract stating what's going on and what they've agreed to. So for them to just go back to school on Monday, it doesn't work that way.
What are you talking about?
He's talking about the judge, the Essex Superior Court judge that said if they go back to, which would mean that they'd have to Steve's point, they'd have to work through the weekend and get a written agreement before the kids could go, because today's Friday, before the kids could go back to school. So they'd have to announce that they had reached agreement on Sunday night in order for the kids to go back to school on Monday.
And thank you for the call. Thank you for the call, Stephen. What do people think about the strikes? Should they be legal? I mean, the MTA has been the Massachusetts Teachers Association is trying to get them to be legalized. They haven't gotten very far on Beacon Hill, and Governor Healy is against it. And by the way, Governor Healy had to be called in last time in the Newton strike that went on and on and on and on and on to try to force them to settle it.
Did they pay the fines when Newton struck? Does anybody remember if they paid the fines, or did they ultimately waive them because they came to agreement? I kind of think they waived them.
I don't know. I thought they paid them, but I could be wrong.
Oh, maybe they did.
Here's from John, our local letter carrier who texts us a lot. He said, just as an aside, from John in Beverly, your local letter carrier, we have been waiting for 16 months to get our contract settled. We follow the law. We do not strike, and we usually do not go past our contract time frames. I mean, teachers are thought of in many cases as essential workers. So cops can't strike, letter carriers can't strike. I don't think firefighters can strike either, can they? I don't think so. They can threaten it. They can have a lot of job actions. But teachers aren't supposed to be striking, but they're striking anyway. Here's a mom of two in Marblehead who says, one in high school, one in middle school. I feel that our school committee has been very hostile toward the teachers union and not willing to meet in the middle in terms of bargaining. I feel for the teachers, tutors, and paraprofessionals. They deserve to be paid a living wage. But you know, one of the big issues, and the Globe did a piece about this too, Deanna Pan and Mandy McLaren, talking about the cost of special needs. Special education is enormously expensive. If you don't have a program that can accommodate your kid in your school system, then you're going to send the child to a different town. Maybe it might be far away. You're going to pay for the bus and all these things. And we've had special ed in Massachusetts since I think 1776. No, Marjorie, it was not 1776. It was 1976, I believe. We started getting special ed accommodations here, and you want everybody, to get the education they deserve. But it's a big cost, and I think a lot of towns they have to override Proposition 2.5 to raise more tax dollars to accommodate some of these increases in school costs. Daniel in Somerville, what do you think, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way we talk about strikes often is that people felt like striking or whatever. It's very casual. But generally, you have to be pretty desperate to strike, right, to not go into work, to do something that, you keep saying it's illegal. So I think it has to be pretty bad for the teachers if they're willing to do this. And, if their job is so important that people can't get to work because of this and, the kids are stuck at home, then, let's pay them.
I tend to agree with Daniel. I mean, there's a big part of me that teachers. There are some very dedicated teachers. We're lucky to have some really dedicated teachers that come out of their own pocket to provide resources in their classrooms sometimes. And a lot of times, what I've noticed is a common thread in their demands is they are always advocating for the paraprofessionals who are always grossly underpaid.
Grossly underpaid.
And I do think that it is a big deal that they don't want to necessarily abandon their students either. And I agree that school committees get to stand on the fact that it is illegal as a means for sort of stalling or waiting or maybe not always negotiating in good faith. That's why I'm finding it so difficult here. There are 3 different jurisdictions. I can't distinguish between school committees who's bargaining in good faith and who's not. They're all sort of lumped together in one big, they're all striking and they're all opposing the strike.
Our staff did some looking into this fine-paying deal and found that Newton teachers had to pay $625,000 in fines.
Yeah.
A Middlesex Superior Court judge ordered the fine split between Newton Public Schools while ruling that the case is over, and it was stipulated in the return to work agreement the union will pay $275,000 in fines to the school district as compensatory fines and $350,000 to the state as coercive fines. One of the problems, though, is that we fund schools in Massachusetts by property taxes for the most part, right?
Right.
And so you have a town that's a poor town, and they don't have, a lot of $1 million
That's
homes.
the point. Yeah, that's what I was trying to.
$5 million homes.
Yeah.
So people are upset about their taxes going up, and you end up having layoffs after a lot of these strikes because the town can't pay for it or the town won't do an override. I think was it Marblehead that refused the 2.5 override 3 times? So where's the town?
Newton had the same problem.
Yeah, where's the town? Well, Newton's is a wealthy town.
Right.
Brookline's a wealthy town.
But they had a property tax issue, and the strike exacerbated it.
Yeah, because taxes in some of these towns
Right.
are astronomical. A lot of people, we were talking about this the other day with Will Austin. Other places have regionalized schools, so Boston would be grouped with Brookline and Newton. Now, I mean, that would be, I think it's a cold day in hell before we get that to happen here, because people are so jealous of their own little neighborhoods and schools. But those places don't have these problems because they have richer places linked with poorer places, and they get a balance, you know what I mean?
Right. Let's
Anyway.
talk to John from Beverly. Hi, John.
How are you?
Good.
I'm a former union president from a firefighters union, and I negotiated for many years.
In which town, John?
Swampscott.
Swampscott, okay.
And I just want to say that most of these cities and towns do not negotiate in good faith because they're in a position where they know you can't strike, so they drag the negotiations out, and they're going to give you the time of day. Now, my daughter's a teacher in Beverly, and she says that they keep coming back with the same proposal over and over again. The city, they're not actually negotiating with the union.
John, we have got a lousy connection here, so I'm going to have to cut you short.
But I think he said
I'm
his
sorry,
daughter's
but,
a teacher.
Yes,
in
but I
one
think
of
we
the
got the gist of it.
jurisdictions.
Well, that's and John, that's a great point because a lot of people have mentioned this in the stories that they don't think the school committees are negotiating in good faith.
Now, my question is whether or not you can talk about that publicly. So usually at the end of a day when a strike goes on for another day, both sides sort of, go to the microphones and talk about how the negotiations went. And you will sometimes hear representatives of the union say they haven't changed anything. We sat there for another day and they haven't changed anything. And then likewise, you may hear from the districts that they've offered something that wasn't offered before, but that it was refused. I think that the more that they talk about that, if one side is really, dragging their feet, the more they let the public know that, the better informed the public would be about the reasons for the strike and why the reasons are persisting for the strike.
A lot of people are complaining about the amount of money that paraprofessionals make. Said I was highballing it when I said make less than $40,000. This one texter says that sometimes they're making in the 20s or $25,000, which is really you can't get very far in Massachusetts.
You know what?
When you're making $25,000.
Laura from Medford, this is interesting. She says, "Hi, Marjorie and Andrea. Why hasn't the law changed to say that if a city does not have a new contract secured when the teacher's contract expires, then a strike is okay? I feel like many of the strikes involve contracts that were way overdue." And that is true not just of teachers, but you hear that in a lot of strikes where they say we've been without a contract for a certain period of time, and we waited as long as we could.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how many times do you hear that? How many contracts are there in the city of Boston? Like something like dozens of them, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And they're always past due.
I had 9 separate unions when I was sheriff when I first started.
Well, that's a lot to negotiate, right? But I'm sure you were a superb negotiator.
But we would also have to wait for the state to decide what they were going to do with the DOC, and then the sheriff's contract sort of followed that percentage. But yeah.
Yeah, apparently our staff says they still haven't worked out their contract in the city of Boston, and we spend a lot of money on schools in the city of Boston.
A lot of money.
And it's going to, I think we're one of the highest. And I think it's going to be difficult with this the property tax fight over whether we're going to be paying.
Definitely going to complicate
Yeah,
this.
It's going to complicate things because property taxes in Boston are pretty high, and the downtown businesses aren't paying what they did because the offices are pretty much empty.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going to take a break.
All right, we're talking about North Shore teacher strikes. We're going to take a quick break, but the conversation is going to continue in just a moment. So stick around. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News.
Flying in and out of Lebanon while Israel and Hezbollah are fighting is too dangerous for most commercial airlines, but one carrier is still operating there.
Middle East Airlines is beyond a flag carrier. It has a national role in keeping Lebanon connected with the rest of the world.
Flight safety in a war zone next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And The Wilbur. Jazz trumpeter and composer Chris Bodie returns to Boston's The Wilbur for 2 shows,
Friday, November 29th and Saturday, November 30th. Tickets and information are available at thewilbur.com. And Supermicro and NVIDIA, accelerating AI with a wide range of AI servers and the NVIDIA AI Enterprise software platform. Supermicro is committed to driving AI infrastructure breakthroughs with rack-scale innovations.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Andrea Cabral is in for Jim Browdy. We have our text question announcement. Andrea, I'm going to make it right now.
You go right ahead.
Our text prompt of the day at 877-301-8970, inspired by yet another great Beth Teitel piece in the Boston Globe. It's about what a pain in the butt, literally, aging can be. So our question to you, based on her column, is how far do you go to stay youthful, loose, and limper, to fight that inevitable tight fascias? Do you know what fascias are, Andrea?
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay. Well, you have to worry about your tight fascias and your drooping pelvic floor and a lot of other problems. So, are you fighting to keep those fascias and pelvic floors in shape, or have you decided to just embrace aging and let everything fall apart? That is our question to you at 877-301-8970, and we will answer, or read your text, I should say, a little bit before the 1 o'clock news. But meanwhile, if you are just joining us now, we're talking about the mess that is the 3 teacher strikes going on simultaneously up on the North Shore in Beverly, Gloucester, and Marblehead. And we're taking your calls. If you're a teacher, we'd love to hear from you. If you're a parent, or if you're a kid, what are you doing for 2 weeks at home, especially you high school kids? I suspect there's a lot of shenanigans going on up there in Beverly, Marblehead, and wouldn't you think? Those teens let loose without any school. 877-301-8970 is the number.
The poor woman who has the 5 kids at the mall has probably never been heard from again.
Can you imagine that? I mean, you have to depend on the help from your neighbors in these situations. And God, these poor people with 5 and 6 kids in the house. Gail in Hopkinton, what do you think?
Well, my daughter is, hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
How are you?
I'm good. My daughter is a teacher, a paraprofessional in Holliston.
Yeah.
And they make way less than $20,000 a year. Some days she has to sub for other teachers that are out.
Wow.
Not professionals, but other teachers. Plus take care of the special needs kids that she's already helping. They're way underpaid.
Yeah, this was a big issue in Newton, too, and in Brookline as well. They said exactly what you're saying, Gail, these horrible, horrible salaries. Somebody just texted in and said she thinks the kids who work in her class who work as babysitters and have jobs in the weekend at Starbucks are making more money than she does as a paraprofessional.
And it is outrageous. I mean, paraprofessionals, the job of paraprofessional in the classroom was created so that teachers would have, some of the necessary support and kids could get more attention. And they basically are treated like interns in terms of their pay, and it's wrong.
A lot of people are worried about, Gail, thank you for the call. A lot of people are worried about their vacations. I guess they have scheduled vacations in February or in April.
Well, they've got to make up the time now or in the summertime. So my buddy Ed Cook, most people who are, if you're in politics at all in the city of Boston, you know Ed Cook in Dorchester. He texted in to say, regarding quote unquote illegal strikes, there's no penalty for school committees who dig their heels in, and that's unfair. And we're hearing that from a lot of our texters is that, on the one side, teachers have essential jobs, but on the other side, what are teachers supposed to do if the other side is purposely stalling in the hope that they just kind of buckle at some point?
Oh, here's a good one. A 22-year-old college grad who goes to work for Facebook writing algorithms to snatch children's eyeballs can make $200,000 a year. A college grad who goes to work as a teacher would feel like he or she did quite well getting a beginning salary of $45,000. That's from Chris in Jamaica Plain. I mean, we should point out that in Boston, when you've been there for a while, you're making over $100,000 a year. You are in Brookline.
It does depend on where you teach. It absolutely does.
Teachers and librarians can make $120,000, $150,000 a year. So not everybody is getting slave wages, which of $45,000, which is not very much in Massachusetts. Dave from Bridgewater.
Hi, Dave.
Thank you for calling.
Hi, guys. So, first you got to understand, these are small towns.
Yeah.
Really relatively small, small cadres of union members. The associations are probably, a couple hundred people. And so they've been going through this for a long time. But on the other hand, the town, teach. They don't have the money without raising taxes. So what's killing them right now, though, is special ed. And I would be looking towards the governor maybe to step in here and help out with these communities and maybe even say something about it. I haven't heard her say anything about these strikes. This is going on a week now in 3 districts. What's your position on this? Maybe the state could help out with some more special ed money, or maybe an idea like regionalizing the care for some of these things.
Yeah,
well, that's what Will Austin was saying. And actually,
Dave,
special ed would.
Thank
you, Dave. That wouldn't be a bad place to start. If you were going to start thinking about regionalizing to sort of balance out the resources and get the neediest students what they need most. That's not a bad place to start.
Well, we should say that at the Ed Reform Bill, which passed, I think, in 1993, Paul Revel always talks about it. He's our education guy, comes in a lot. That was supposed to rejigger some of the funding to poor districts so they wouldn't be in such dire straits. But it's still not enough. Like I said before, if you have towns where the average house is $2 million, you're obviously going to have a lot more money to spend on the schools than a place like Gloucester, parts of which are pretty struggling. Gloucester's not necessarily a rich town, and that's part of the problem. Let's go to Bridget in Somerset. Hi, Bridget.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Enjoying your show today. Listen, I'm calling in as a former educator, 35 years, and I was just saying I would like to scream from the rooftop in support of these teachers. Teaching today is not the job it was at all. At all. Not post-COVID, it's a totally different picture. And I don't think people realize that we have no other option to get paid more money. In the corporate world, we can go to your corporate officer and say, I'm worth this amount of money. I'm really good at my job. We can't do that in teaching. And you're held by the town, like you said, Marjorie, that you work in. The federal government has got to step in if we want a functional future society.
But Bridget,
it is not.
You know, one of the things, and you're a teacher, so you know better than I, but one of the things I thought as I was a student a million years ago and watching my kids go through school, there were some teachers that were fantastic, that knocked their socks off, that you just were so amazed by. And then there were some real deadbeats. And if I were the teacher that knocked her socks off every day, and next door to me was a deadbeat, I would be really upset that that person was making the exact same amount of money as I am. But that's how it works in teaching. What do you think about that?
You're asking her about merit pay.
It's horrible. I think we need to change it. I think education needs to change. What we teach, when we teach, where we teach. It's a totally different world.
You know, you and I should get together, Bridget, because I'm a big for it. The schools don't work in many cases anymore. We need to blow the whole thing up and start all over because we talked with Will Austin about this. We're still operating the schools like we did 100 years ago. They haven't changed. We can't get government paid for after-school programs. We just get rid of the MCAS, which I think is a graduation requirement, which I think is a terrible idea, but I'm in a minority because it won overwhelmingly. But we just need to change the way we operate, and we don't. We just kind of tinker around the edges of...
Well, and federal help is not going to be on the horizon, considering, Trump intends to do away with the whole entire Department of Education and wants to put Linda McMahon in charge.
That's right. From the World Wrestling Association, whatever it's called.
But I think to Bridget's point, and to your point, the change is going to have to be local and outside the box thinking, revolutionary type thinking, which is going to have to be embraced by the people who control the purse strings. And they're not going to do that until there's enough of a groundswell in terms of who's voting and for whom, these elected officials that, if you're not going to listen, then we'll vote you out kind of thing, or you'll be primaried or whatever it might be. That's really the push. The inertia comes from not motivating elected people or people in positions of power enough to think outside the box and change the way things are done. The status quo is helped by people who run in seats that are safe.
Well, I hate to say this, Andrea, but the Democrats have been big backers of the status quo, and it's been the Republicans that have been more revolutionary. So maybe the Democrats should think about that, because some races were lost because of Democratic cities and states that kept the schools closed too long during the pandemic. Youngkin down in Virginia, that was like a big thing that pushed people to say, the heck with you, I'm going to go with Youngkin, the Republican, and I don't think you really want him running the whole country. Anyway, we're done with this.
That's all the time we have. Thank you always for your calls and your text. Fatalist Marjorie just said we're done with this. After a quick break, former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick, who also served in the Justice Department under President Clinton, will zoom in to talk about the future of the DOJ in Trump's second term and what's to come for the Democratic Party. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Trusted. Local. News.
I'm reporter Megan Smith. Come with me to an adaptive fashion show at Boston Fashion Week.
Adaptive fashion means people with any ability could be able to dress themselves as independent as possible and with as much dignity as possible.
I can look cute and adorable and feel good.
It gives you that confidence.
Dedicated to what matters to you. GBH 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Samet's Blackstone Associates, providing brand-focused strategy, content, cross-media design, and fundraising support to help mission-driven organizations build and deepen relationships. More at sametz.com. And Rockland Trust Bank, helping foster healthy relationships with money by providing education and resources to the community, one neighborhood at a time. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We're live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Going to be joined in just a couple of minutes by the former governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Deval Patrick. But while we're waiting, I'll tell you about our text prompt of the day based on a Beth Titel column in the Boston Globe. Okay. How much of a pain in the neck it can be to get old, or a pain in the butt, literally. So our question is, how do you plan to stay youthful, loose, and limber? Is 20 minutes a day on your foam roller enough or not enough? Have you just decided to embrace aging, forget about the roller, and just realize that you're never going to get that full range of motion in your neck again for as long as you live, and you may as well just forget about it. You can text us our thoughts at 877-301-8970 and tell us about the details of your workouts to try to maintain your youth. Okay. There's Governor Deval Patrick right there. So it is hard to believe it was a mere 8 days from President-elect Trump's announcement that he would nominate and battle Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz to lead the Department of Justice from come January, to Gaetz's resignation from Congress. It didn't even last as long as that Scaramucci fellow who was gone like about, I think, about a week and a half.
Yeah.
Eventually, Gaetz's withdrawal from the running came yesterday, and Trump's latest pick is another Floridian, former state attorney General Pam Bondi, who's got some issues we'll talk about of her own. But here with us now on Zoom to talk about what the Department of Justice might look like in a second Trump administration, plus what's ahead for Democrats next year, is Deval Patrick, who's a two-term... Oh, can you hear me? I hope he can hear me. I don't think the governor can hear me. Anyway, I'll keep introducing him and hopefully we can fix it. Deval Patrick, two-term Democratic governor of Massachusetts, who also served as the United States Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division under President Bill Clinton in the Department of Justice, which is now under siege. He's also a business leader and apparently a beekeeper. Can you hear me, Governor Patrick?
Can Governor Patrick hear us?
I don't think he can.
I don't think so.
Oh,
Okay.
they're working on it.
So while we're waiting for that,
Yeah,
we'll talk about Pam Bondi.
Oh, let's
okay?
talk about Pam Bondi.
All
Great.
right. So for people who don't know, Pam Bondi is the former Attorney General for the state of Florida.
That's right.
She is, without a doubt, a Trump loyalist. You know, she's on the campaign trail for him. But people may remember that Trump University, after it was shut down, was also the subject of a number of lawsuits in Florida because it was a fraudulent university that was ripping off its students. She, I'm sure this was no coincidence at all, she could have joined New York in the lawsuit against Trump University and Donald Trump, but mysteriously, after receiving a $25,000 contribution to the PAC that supported her, decided not to join that lawsuit. So, you know, she has shown her loyalty to Trump in many, many, many ways. And I think, you know, people are sort of, you can already hear, can you hear us now?
No,
Still can't? Okay.
I think you still can't hear us.
You can already hear people saying that compared to Matt Gaetz, Bondi is a sober choice. Compared to Matt Gaetz, practically anybody would be a sober choice. So I want to just caution people to not say just because she appears to not have engaged in threesomes or paid, you know, men for sex.
The threesomes. We learned about that.
She somehow is this sort of thoughtful, you know, choice for AG, and that's one of the things that we're going to hopefully get a chance to ask former Governor Patrick about, is how he feels about that.
He can hear us now. Governor Patrick, we're really sorry about that mess up. I'm sorry.
No, it's probably on my end.
Okay.
After all these years of Zoom, you'd think I'd figured it out. How are you both?
Oh,
good. How are you?
We're very happy to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us. Jim is very sorry that he's not here today, but I want you to know, Governor Patrick, that I have used your line about Jim Browdy probably 200 times since you said it, maybe 1,000 times. Which was? Do you remember what it was? Your line about him?
Yes, I do.
Please share
yes,
it.
I do.
Please share.
I didn't mean for it to be quite so to stick quite so. I was teasing him. I said he is often wrong, but never in doubt.
We thought you nailed it here at Boston Public Radio, Governor Patrick.
I'm very sorry he's not feeling well, but I'm a little relieved that I get to talk with the two of you.
Okay. Well, Andrea Cabral, of course, is... did you hire her? No, you didn't hire her. Did she? He hired you.
Yeah.
He hired you.
No,
That's
we
right.
worked together. Yes,
That's
absolutely.
right. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Why don't you ask?
One of the high points of my career.
Thank you very much for
Hi,
saying
Andrea.
that. Hi, and it's really good to see you. So let's start with Pam Bondi, and you know, her. You couldn't hear us, but I was sort of saying that, you know, not surprisingly, pundits are rushing to talk about her as a sober choice, and I thought compared to Matt Gaetz, everybody's a sober choice.
Sure.
People shouldn't forget who Pam Bondi is and who she's loyal to. I'd also like you to speak to the fact that Trump, with Todd Blanche and I think 2 other members of his criminal defense team, intends to install them at the DOJ in high positions, making him the first president to have attorney-client privilege with members of the DOJ. So can you speak to Pam Bondi and these potential other picks that Trump has and their impact?
Well, Pam Bondi's reputation, in my view, is limited to the little bit I've read about her. And since she was named yesterday, although I think she and I had a case against each other years ago, a death penalty case. She's been a state's attorney for a long time, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I think she may have been on the brief when we went up to the 11th Circuit. That was a long, long time ago now. And I didn't think of her then as the kind of hard right ideologue she apparently has been in the last little while. I understand that she received a large campaign donation from Donald Trump.
25,000.
Right.
Yeah.
To a PAC supporting her.
It was an illegal donation, by the way, violating federal campaign finance laws.
Is that right? And
yes.
then she soon thereafter dropped the investigation into Trump University. I think she was one of the few attorney generals who stayed away from that case, and the allegations in that case ultimately settled. I think, Andrea, you probably remember whether it was settled or but they were pretty serious allegations.
Trump had to pay a $25 million fine for defrauding these students.
Right.
That's a lot of money. Yeah.
Right, which follows a certain pattern in his business career. I think I hope the Senate will take seriously its responsibility to examine and to vet and to do background checks on her. It is worrisome that, as you say, he has attorney-client privilege with someone he is, someone's, you mentioned all three of the members of his defense team. Someone's he's going to appoint as public servants and who are by design meant to be independent of the president and of the presidency. But I have stopped expecting. I hope, but I've stopped expecting that the Senate will do what the Senate's supposed to do, in the same way that I've stopped expecting that the mainstream media will do what the mainstream media used to do. And we will see. Now, how they behave, if and when confirmed, is another thing. But the bigger question here, and I'm sorry I missed the opening of the show. You guys have probably been talking about this today and for many days, is just how kind of disrespectful of government and of the public these nominees are as a whole. It's like it's the remake of the Apprentice, kind of just for everybody to kind of watch and enjoy and giggle at, as if it doesn't have consequences practically in our lives, in the life of the Commonwealth, in the reputation of the United States around the world.
Well, Governor Patrick, there was a lot of complaining by Donald Trump that the Justice Department had been weaponized beneath Joe Biden. I did not see that, but there's fears now that it could really be weaponized under Pam Bondi, whoever it ends up to be, and Trump's three personal lawyers. What do you think could happen?
I sure hope not. And if it's permitted, and it is what he's promised to do. I'm not one of the people who says that that all of what he said is just bluster. It is what he has said he will do, and what many of his team set out to do, just basically to harass people using the DOJ. What's worrisome about Bondi in that respect is that she did his bidding after the 2016 election, in the election denial, the all that. And none of the evidence proved that out. None of it. But she did that. She did that bidding notwithstanding, and we will see again if she is confirmed, whether she follows that pattern. That pattern, to me, would suggest she should not be confirmed.
Now, Merrick Garland, gave his first remarks since the election to some folks from the Sovereign District, the SDNY, and it was sort of a keep your chin up, remember your mission. You still have work to do, and you should sort of keep focused on that. I don't know how much that helps people. It was reported that there was open weeping at the DOJ once the election was over, and I actually confirmed that with a friend of mine who spoke to former colleagues. Now, you were the head of the Civil Rights Division, and can you explain to people sort of how it works? Mm-hmm. This sort of the idea that there'll be what Gates talked about, cutting heads if he was over there. Yeah. How does that work in terms of who can be fired and who can't? How does civil service work? What happens to bureau chiefs and U.S. attorneys? What kind of impact could we see there?
Right. So the career staff at the Civil Rights Division at the Justice Department generally are seasoned professionals. They are civil servants. They are part of a hiring system that goes back a long, long time, and it's very, very hard to fire them, except for just outrageous stuff. If they really just steal or lie or what have you, when anybody ought to be exposed to being fired, including the chief executive of the United States.
And explain.
But,
Can you just explain why that is? Why that is in place there?
Well, because we want law enforcement to follow the law and the facts wherever they take an investigation or a case, and not to follow the whims of of elected officials. In fact, I remember, Andrew, I think I may have told you this. After I'd been at DOJ for a little while in my role as head of the Civil Rights Division, and there were 200 or so really terrific lawyers I was getting to know, and they were teaching me a ton. And they at one point said, we refer to the political appointees as the Christmas help. And right, because they come and go. They come and go. They understood their role. They, meaning the career folks, they understood their role in responding to a change in agenda. Right. So I came in after, I don't know what it was, maybe 12 years, a dozen years, maybe longer, of Republican administrations, and we used to talk about how the Civil Rights Division was getting back in the civil rights business. But there were folks there who had been doing that work to the extent they were authorized to do it, for the years before me. And it would have been impossible for us to do the work with integrity without them. And I think that is true throughout the Justice Department, and I think that is a consideration throughout the other departments. There are political appointees. They are the most senior level, and then sub-cabinet officers, as I am. And then those political appointees do get to bring in, a handful of others to support them. But on the whole, the continuity of government depends on professionals who understand what they are doing, who understand their responsibility to respond to a change in agenda, but still to bring a smoothness in the transition and an integrity ultimately to the work.
Yeah, well, that's one of the problems with Pam Bondi. I think her integrity has already been shown to be minimal after she got rid of the lawsuit about Trump University with the $25,000 campaign contribution. But I wanted to ask you, Governor Patrick, there's been a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking about the election. You talked about it.
Monday, Tuesday,
yeah,
Wednesday.
That's right. But one of the things that I was reading about just in the last couple of days is that Democrats didn't turn out as much in democratically run states. And one of the arguments is that we move so slowly. For example, Biden with the drug reduction prices, that's a big deal, but we're not going to feel those until 2026. The diabetes medication was sooner. Or right here in Massachusetts, where we have these terrible housing problems, and we talk a lot about it. We haven't done a whole heck of a lot. We can't even get anything out of the legislature to deal with some kind of rent stabilization in Boston. So is that legitimate? Are we just too slow, or are the Democrats too slow is the criticism? I mean, Merrick Garland has been criticized over and over for being too slow to go after Trump. But the Democrats in Democratic-run states aren't seeing results quick enough to get them on board.
Oh, there's so much, Marjorie, in your question. I do want to say, I should have said at the outset, I'm old-fashioned in the sense that I do think presidents ought to be able to have their own appointees. They ought to be able to have their team.
Yeah.
But I think what we're talking about are appointees or prospective appointees who are out of bounds, frankly. And that's what the Senate's job is. So with that, I think, look, it's really hard for me in the wake of this election, or frankly, many others, to paint too broad a brush. There's so much going on. I do think, and Andrea's heard me talk about this, out in front in the public and behind closed doors. I really do think that we need to be governing for the long term and not just the next election cycle. I think we need to be making meaningful changes that are that matter where and as they touch people's lives, and that last. And sometimes that takes time. I don't think that's a complaint I would have of Democrats. I will say, as a Democrat, a loyal Democrat, but a Democrat who feels Democrats sometimes gets on his last nerve, there is a part of what we have missed that I have been feeling for a long time, and that is that the political dynamic in this country is not Democrat-Republican. It's insider-outsider. I experienced that in the Commonwealth. It is true all over the country. Most people feel like outsiders. They don't feel like government is about them, is thinking about them. They listen to candidates talk about their progress based on how much money they've raised or what the last poll is, not how many lives they've touched. And just think about the presidential election. Just think about that cycle. If you don't live in a battleground state, you could easily think this thing doesn't have anything to do with you at all, right?
Yeah.
They come to Massachusetts because we are an ATM. That's the only reason. And they come over and over again. If you are a Republican in a so-called blue state or a Democrat in a so-called red state, nobody talks to you. Nobody engages with you. And so you come into that environment where those feelings have been surfacing for a long time, and you have a candidate in the Republican nominee, in my view, who doesn't actually intend to do anything for the people who feel like outsiders, but to his credit, he does talk to them.
Yeah.
We try to do stuff for folks, we as Democrats, who feel like outsiders, but we don't talk to them. It's like, you gotta be kidding. And the idea, you know how strongly I feel about grassroots politicking. The idea that grassroots politicking is about, trying to get volunteers to show up in number in the last couple weeks of the campaign, rather than building relationships over time that are lasting, that are about supporting people, that are about listening to people. And I hope that is in the navel gazing, I guess it is, or the post-election analysis, or whatever it is that the party elders are doing these days, I hope they will reconsider the way we think about politics, and to bring that sort of service orientation, which is why I am a Democrat, back into our politics.
So I can certainly say, as somebody who was there, that is exactly how Deval Patrick governed. He governed for the long term, and people saw him when we dealt with, unaccompanied minors coming in to the Air Force Base, and how we were going to deal with that. I think people had a great opportunity to see that he was thinking in the long term about the welfare of those kids, and showed compassion there. The one thing that I always point out about his governing that I thought was the stellar example, there were many examples in his budgets, but he went to the legislature and said, with regard to the T, you have to spend this money now. These are the problems that we've identified. You need to appropriate this money now, and they absolutely didn't listen to him. So I'm going to say to you, Governor.
Two times.
Yeah, two times. And Rich Davey was fabulous. You and Rich Davey were fabulous on that. But I want to say to you now, what is your best advice for the current legislature, who seems very content with the status quo? We've only got about a minute.
We got 30 seconds,
We've got 30 seconds? I'm sorry. I thought we had a minute.
God bless them. God bless them. There are unmet needs that we have the capability to meet. And we should not be surprised if voters realize we are not meeting those unmet needs, and the thing you think you're protecting, which is your job, is in jeopardy.
Thank you.
Well, that was succinctly put.
That was very succinctly put.
Thank you very much, Governor Deval Patrick. I think you are never wrong and never in doubt. So there you go.
We've been speaking with Deval Patrick.
Thank you so much.
We've been speaking with Deval Patrick, two-term former Massachusetts governor. He's also served as United States Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division under President Bill Clinton. Coming up after the noon news, GBH's Callie Crossley is here. You're listening to the Boston Public Radio.
Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Subaru of New England. This winter, you can explore New England in the all-wheel drive 2025 Subaru Outback. You can find your Subaru retailer at SubaruofNewEngland.com. The next great performances is
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. New York Judge Juan Merchan has indefinitely adjourned President-elect Donald Trump's criminal sentencing in his hush money case. NPR's Jimena Bustillo reports both sides signal they wanted to push a sentencing after Trump won the presidential election.
After several days, today Merchan adjourned next week's sentencing date. Trump's lawyers have long attempted to dismiss the case, arguing that evidence used in the case should not have been introduced and the incoming president cannot be prosecuted. Prosecutors have also prepared to fight the dismissal. Filings are due in December. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News, New York.
The northwestern U.S. is closing out a week of intense weather. More than a foot of flood-generating rainfall, broad electricity-cutting wind gusts. Blame it on the atmospheric river. Here's NPR's Lauren Summer with this explanation.
Atmospheric rivers are basically these plumes of moisture that move across the Pacific Ocean.
$1 a year. I do think that the $250 billion will strike many as being on the low side.
Still, a senior U.S. official said that would be a significant lift over the previous $100 billion pledge, which wealthy countries never fulfilled. Jeff Brady, NPR News.
U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein has left Israel after meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Hochstein had been in the region trying to negotiate a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. NPR's Kat Lonsdorf reports from Tel Aviv.
Hochstein didn't brief media in Israel before departing, but in Lebanon earlier this week, he called talks, quote, very constructive. Hochstein had extended his stay in Beirut by an extra day and made what he called additional progress in talks with the Lebanese parliament speaker, who's been negotiating on Hezbollah's behalf. In Israel, Hochstein met with Netanyahu and Israel's new defense minister, Yisrael Katz. Israel launched an invasion into southern Lebanon more than 7 weeks ago, after Hezbollah and Israel had been trading cross-border fire for nearly a year.
It's NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Alice Brock, the Alice in Arlo Guthrie's Thanksgiving classic Alice's Restaurant, has died. Her death was first announced by Arlo Guthrie through his record label, Rising Sun Records. As well as being a restaurateur, Alice was an author. She was an artist who had been living for decades in Provincetown. Guthrie's 1967 anthem is an 18-minute story about a Thanksgiving visit to Alice, who lived in Stockbridge at Trinity Church while running the backroom restaurant, which was better known as Alice's Restaurant nearby. Guthrie took out her trash as a friendly gesture, loaded it into a red VW microbus, found the local dump clothes for Thanksgiving, and he threw the garbage-filled bag into a ditch. Next day, he was arrested for littering, and a song was born. Alice Brock was 83. Don't look now, but New England could be dealing with a White Friday on Black Friday next week. Forecasters at AccuWeather say a significant storm has the potential for accumulating snow across the eastern half of the country on Thanksgiving and would likely arrive in New England on Friday. As far as Thanksgiving Day goes, the forecast calls for a sunny sky of 43 degrees, but the weekend could be a different story with that messy, wintry mix heading our way. In sports, the Celtics on the road playing the Washington Wizards tonight. The Patriots are in Miami on Sunday. Harvard-Yale football game is tomorrow in Alston. And we've got a good chance of more rain today. Increasing clouds right now, 49 degrees. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from ARM, committed to delivering innovative, advanced computing designed to enable worldwide companies to unleash the capabilities and experiences of AI. The future of AI is built on ARM. ARM.com. This is NPR.
number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. I am here today with Andrea Cabral, the former sheriff of Suffolk County and Public Safety Secretary for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. She's in for Jim Browdy, who has COVID, and we hope he feels better soon. I'm going to be back here at the library with Andrea Campbell for Ask the AG on Tuesday, and the Attorney General will be with us from 1 to 2, taking our questions and yours. And one more reminder of our text prompt of the day at 877-301-8970. We're getting some very good emails and texts here, Andrea. They're inspired, this whole thing is inspired by this really funny Beth Titel column in the Globe today about what a pain in the butt, literally, getting old can be. So our question for you is, how far do you go to stay youthful, loose, and limber? Or have you just decided to embrace it all, aging happens, and forget about your aching, creaky knees, creaky hips, creaky shoulders, and that pesky cervical spine? You can text us your thoughts at 877-301-8970, and we'll read some of the text before the 1 o'clock news. But right now, we're joined at the Boston Public Library desk by Callie Crossley. Callie's the host of Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, which you can catch Sunday nights right here on 89.7 at 6 o'clock. Hear Callie's commentaries Mondays on GBH's Morning Edition, and she's also co-host for GBH's Culture Show, which airs daily at 2 o'clock right here on 89.7. And today's Week in Review is going to be right here in the Boston Public Library. Hey, Callie.
Hey. Hi, Callie. Hey. So, Callie, we're in year 4, speeding our way to year 5 of this sort of a level of political gaslighting where, regardless of what the true outcome of a thing is, you simply say that it was the thing you wanted to happen, i.e., I won the election, and I actually am going to announce that on election night before all the votes are counted, and then you put it in the ether, and it gets picked up, and people believe it. We had that this year, in this election too, and it had to do with mandate, that Trump had a mandate. So tell us about this mandate that we've all been hearing so much about.
Well, part of the mandate had to do with an overwhelming response on the popular vote. And what the Cook Political Report has just said is that it's actually quite close, that Harris has 74 million votes to 76 to Trump. So, I mean, that's still a lot of votes, but it's not the gap that we heard, probably because the numbers hadn't all come in, and they'll still be coming in. So we don't even still know the final numbers. So if you have that, and then you have the 2 chambers of Congress that are now Republican-controlled, looks like a mandate to me from the outside, but mostly I think it was predicated on the popular vote, because as we recall, in 2016, he lost the popular vote hugely when he ran against Hillary Clinton, even though he won the electoral vote. So it's now you have to figure out how are you defining mandate.
And is it synonymous with majority?
Yes.
Which I think those are different, right? I think those are sort of different things.
Yes, but I think legitimately some people will say if you have both houses, both chambers of Congress, and even if he doesn't have the popular vote, he still came out on top, not the majority. So he has, maybe it's a small M, but he still got it.
Okay.
Okay.
So it may not strictly be a gaslighting thing this time, like it was on the election day.
I prefer to say most Americans voted for somebody else. That makes me feel a little bit better than I did the day after the election. So Callie Crossley, this Nancy Mace, this congresswoman from South Carolina, has made a big deal about not allowing a trans congresswoman from Delaware to use the bathroom that she wants to use. She wants her to use the men's room, even though she's a trans woman. But what this Washington Post story said is it's not just the bathrooms on Capitol Hill that could be impacted here.
Yeah, this is, I mean, it could be, first of all, everywhere. And in Washington, D.C., the mayor, Muriel Bowser, who's a black woman, I'll point out, has not responded yet. I'm sure she's trying to figure out, what do I do with this, frankly. I have to say that I read this, and I know we filter through our own lived experiences, so let me just say, as the child of somebody who had parents who were denied access to public facilities, including bathrooms, over and over and over again for no other reason than their skin color, this has a resonance for me in a different way. And I'm listening to this woman, Representative Nancy Mace, talk about security issues. They wouldn't even make up an issue for my parents. It was just that you can't use that facility because you're not white. And I know, because my mother was who she was, that more than a few times she just went in. And we didn't know what was going to happen, but there you go. So this woman, the person that she is directing this against specifically, and by the way, she's gone on the record to say, some said, well, maybe, it's bad enough, but there's only one trans woman in the Congress now, and it's just directed at her. She made it clear it's directed at her. But McBride, I'm trying to find her first name. Sarah McBride has said she'll just follow the rules, and wherever they say she can't go, she won't go, and because I think she doesn't want to stir up any kind of thing.
She shouldn't have to.
She shouldn't have to. And personally, just for me, based on the lived experience I just shared, I want her to be John Lewis and go in there.
Callie, when you were little Callie, and you experienced this with your parents, what'd you think?
You're scared to death. She's going to be scared on other issues.
Yeah.
I think what Sarah McBride is trying to do is, let me deflect from this. Let me just get to the job I was elected to do.
Yeah.
I don't want to get mired down here. They want me. They're baiting me. They want me to respond. I think that's a perfectly mature response. I'm just saying, in my heart of hearts, I'd like for her to be John Lewis and take that on too.
Yeah.
But she doesn't have time. She's got to do some other things. I get that. I just want it to be, as a discussion, we should be talking about how nakedly horrific this is.
And bigoted and
cruel. And I personally like Fetterman's response, which is that you can come use my bathroom any time. By the way, they have private bathrooms.
Every office has a private bathroom.
Yeah.
No, this is for Nancy Mace, it's performative. I've often said, if you ever wanted to somehow, rid yourself of Nancy Mace, put a podium and a microphone in the middle of any busy highway, and she'll run out there into traffic and kill herself. So, no, seriously. Yeah. she just, her own staff talks about her doing things like this in order to get attention. But it is the cruelty and the fact that they have sway over DC. DC's not a state.
I know. But here's the thing. They went back and found quotes from her when she was on the exact opposite. When she said, I want to celebrate, all of the people in my area and hold up. She was singing a whole different tune.
Well, it's all the Trump turnarounds. Pam Bondi's the same thing. RFK Jr.'s the same thing. As we learned, he called him a Nazi on his radio show and all these terrible things, and now he's done a 180 as well.
But the language of the bill. Look at the language of the bill, because it affects Title IX and it affects D.C. bathrooms.
That's right.
There's the performative aspect that gets the attention, but there's a method to their madness, and the devil is in the details there.
Well, you know what? Sarah McBride can, appropriately, as she has at this moment decided for herself, I'm not dealing with this, but others will end up taking up this challenge. That's the best way I can put it right now, because it impacts many other people. And I cannot see people in Washington, D.C. just saying, okay, it's going to affect our bathrooms and we'll say nothing about it. I think this will end up being the kind of volatile conversation that Representative Nancy Mace hoped it would for her own reasons. I would hope that whatever the resistance or the refusal to pay attention to this, if that comes to that, people can do in some kind of constructive way. But it's just, and it's so unnecessary. I guess it just is a gut punch for all of those kinds of things. It just makes you crazy. It makes me crazy anyway.
So the other thing that we talked about, remember when basically President Trump, or President-elect Trump, I should say, was implying that that immigrants were stealing all the so-called black jobs, and it was Michelle Obama that had the great line about Kamala Harris is running for a black job or something. That was a great line. But it turns out that for all his talk about what he was going to do for African Americans, what he had done for the economy, not many black jobs in his administration.
And why are we surprised? I mean, seriously. I was embarrassed for Tim Scott on the campaign trail. I just love you, he says at one stop. Are you kidding me? Senator Scott, have some dignity about yourself. If you do love the man that way, please tell him backstage. I mean, did you think this was going to get you a job? Did you really? Then he's gone and gotten engaged interesting timing,
Yeah.
because I think he thought, I'm going to be in the cabinet. I got to be like a married man, family man, to hold up whatever this fantasy that people have of folks who are supposed to be in government. I really have no words. On the other hand, what words can you say to sellouts in general? I'm speaking to you, Representative Brian Donalds. Are you kidding me? And he says, oh, well, I didn't expect to get a job. Yes, you did. Come on. You expected to get a job. And hey, it's not over. I'm sure he'll appoint them to something else, but after everybody else that he wants is in place, why should they be surprised? I don't think they are. I, however, think some of them were on the payroll already. So this is, again, this is Callie's comments. So don't be coming for GBH. This is Callie, okay, saying this is outrageous to me and disgusting, their behavior during the campaign. Look, Brian Donalds, Tim Scott, you want to support the guy, support the guy. In a constructive way, say what you say. But the kind of sycophancy that went on, not to say we didn't see it with the other people as well, just makes me sick. When people have fought and died for you to even have a chance to be sitting in those seats, come on, come on.
Right. No, listen, I have nothing to add because I'm completely with you, and nobody should be surprised. And they'll probably beg and plead, but I don't think they're going anywhere in this administration.
Well, I love this guy, John James, the guy from Michigan, who was at the Republican National Convention, and he told black voters, if you don't vote for Donald Trump, you ain't black. And then apparently Trump told him he was going to put him in charge of bringing back the auto industry. I think Representative James is still waiting for the call. If his whether or not he's going to get any sort of job and bring back.
And I hope he's holding his breath.
I do too. And I want to make a distinction between these people who I have no words for. I obviously have some words for, but there are some folks who have all along, I don't get it, but have all along, without payment, they are true believers, think that President-elect Trump was their guy. They didn't expect to get a job. They just supported him for what he stood for in their minds. Okay, that's a different group. I'm talking about the sycophancy here with these people, just to be clear. And it's just,
And that you don't, even if you were to get a job, you don't intend to enter the administration hoping to change those things that you find objectionable,
right.
As a black person,
right.
Or hoping to get more resources for the things that you think are important to help your own constituency
right.
or help people of color. They had no intention of doing that.
No.
They would be slavish minions to him anyway.
Right.
And still they're not getting jobs, which is kind of,
And here's an interesting point. Of all of these, Tim Scott has some, skills or whatever, but Ben Carson actually is a renowned doctor. Well, he's said a lot of stuff that I don't agree with in recent years, but he's a renowned doctor. He's made it plain that he supported President-elect Trump. Hello, Health and Human Services. I mean, that's, if you're going to appoint somebody, here's someone with actual credentials who falls in the same camp of some of these other people, and he didn't have a shot at that job, did he now?
No.
Okay, well, there we go.
So here's some good, we can talk about something good and positive, actually.
Yes, we can.
We can pivot to that. So tell us about what is being contemplated for this mansion out in Western Mass that was the former home of the founder of Yankee Candle.
Yeah, so the Yankee Candle founder, I love Yankee candles, by the way.
Yeah.
Had this sprawling Western Massachusetts estate that people are just, describing in wondrous tones. Somebody said it'd be like owning Disneyland, pretty much. That's how beautiful it was. And they've had it on the market for 2 years, didn't move. And so now they're going to redo it in a development called Pioneer Points, a $200 million redevelopment plan. Now, for the most of these units, they're going to be quite luxurious with every amenity one could want, the bowling alley, the spa, the movie theater, even a concert venue. But a quarter of the places being built, of the apartments or houses, I don't know what it's going to look like in the end, are being set aside for affordable housing.
Yeah.
Which I think is fantastic. So there'll be some people who will be able to live there. Again, I know people are thinking, okay, this is a very tiny drop. It is. And in fact, because of all kinds of stuff they may have to do, they may have to drop the overall numbers of units that they're building. But even with that, a quarter of the final number will be affordable housing. They are estimating now that a household earning about $84,000 a year would end up paying not even $2,000, $1,875 a month. We know here in Boston that $2,000 is about the average for an apartment.
Yeah.
So this is, fabulous. It would be for a family, or actually they're thinking they're probably more. It's 55 plus. So we're talking about folks who have presumably downsized, or maybe just have the grandkids coming over or whatever. But it's still a great opportunity in general for everyone, people who can afford all the other amenities, and then the quarter of the units that'll be available in an affordable way. And hey, we have such a problem with affordable housing in this state.
Horrible.
That whatever we can get, let's get.
It's hundreds of units. I mean,
Yes,
it's like, at least at this count, roughly like 400 units. So that's
I
a
like
lot.
the indoor water park thing. I mean, imagine
I like the
having a
movie
place
theater.
with movie theater. I mean, which is all pretty nice. Why do you like a Yankee Candle? Sometimes I walk into a Yankee Candle store and I'm overwhelmed by the.
I love it.
You do?
Yeah, because it's just so many wonderful scents.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
guess he made a lot of money on those candles. So before we get what you're doing on the show, just briefly, I mentioned it before. RFK Jr. I always think of his great late father, RFK. Ran for president back in 1968, of course, was assassinated. But he, as we mentioned before, used to be a big critic of Trump. Now he's gone on the Trump bandwagon. He's going to be supposedly the head of Health and Human Services. We'll see about that. But he really laid into Trump.
Yeah.
When Trump ran the first time. And just like J.D. Vance did. We talk about these people that do these 180s. I mean, he's a big one. He said he was horrible.
This quote, and this is on a podcast.
Do we have the sound?
Do you?
Do you have? I think we have the sound.
Oh, do
right?
we have the sound? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
we have
you're
a
right.
clip.
We do.
This is from RFK's
Thank you,
own
Andrea.
radio show,
Yeah.
which he called Ring of Fire. I
Ring
don't know
of
if he's still
Fire.
doing it. There was a CNN senior reporter who actually took a dive into his radio show, found multiple examples of him criticizing Trump, and like J.D. Vance, comparing him to Hitler, but in even stronger terms. So here's the clip.
You write about Trump. Well, the way that you build a truly vicious nationalist movement is to wed a relatively small core of belligerent idiots to a much larger group of opportunists and spineless fellow travelers whose primary function is to turn a blind eye to things. We may not have that many outright Nazis in America, but we have plenty of cowards and bootlickers, and once those fleshy dominoes start tumbling into the Trump camp, the game is up. When you talk about fleshy dominoes, Chris Christie comes to mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So he threw in a shot at Chris Christie there at the end, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, those are very, very, very strong words.
Yeah.
But here he is.
Okay, so I want to start by saying you have the right to change your mind. You have the right to change your mind and to say, hey, I was over here and now I've come to a different place and I'm over here. Here's what bothers me, and I'm going to guess it's what's bothering you. This is clearly all political. I don't see him, I saw the light and see what the man represents, and this is my, Northern Star. This is like, oh, it's good for me if I jump over here. And that certainly was J.D. Vance. And so for me, this is disgusting on two levels. First of all, please keep Hitler's name out of your mouth. But second of all, it's just so graspy and unseemly for somebody who has a lot going for himself, comes from a family with a name of folks who have been in service. I mean, even before he got hooked up with this group, he was trying to do a service. We can disagree with how he was going about it, some of us strongly. But, he was on a different path.
Environmental lawyer.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
and he's right about the pesticides and additives in the foods. I mean,
Right.
I think we do have too many additives in the foods, but he's kind of a crackpot.
If he had changed his mind prior to running for president and deciding he could throw in with this guy and come, get something from it, I could hear him better. Still be, this is interesting that you've done this. But I think he also should have come clean and said, I said some things before I saw the light, if that's what he did. I just don't think he saw the light. I think he saw the power.
Well, what he and Vance have both done is say that they were lulled into with misinformation and disinformation by Democrats.
Yes.
They listened to Democrat propaganda, around this, and now they realize it was all lies. So it's even worse than the
right.
sort of cynicism and opportunism. Let's say that let's blame the Democrats for the fact that we're craven and hypocritical.
I just have to point out, because I go crazy with these attacks on the mainstream media, that the mainstream media, the New York Times, brought us a visual of Matt Gaetz and his 54 Venmo or PayPal payments, however he did it, to people so he could go to these sex
Looked like a Rico murder boy.
That was the New York Times. And then CNN discovered the threesome reporting. And shortly after the threesome reporting came out, that was the end of Matt Gaetz. So for much everybody likes to dump on the so-called mainstream media, the mainstream media is the place where most of this stuff is all uncovered. Anyway, what are you doing on your show on Sunday night?
We're taking a look at some local news with a real deep dive into some neighborhood stuff. The struggle in one community around the chain store. We have these conversations going on in Massachusetts all the time, because most communities would like to reject chain restaurants, chain stores, as they think they undermine mom and pop shops. So in this case, the approval came. The Papa John's is in where it is. The local community protested, but other people wanted it, and they made Papa John's make some adjustments to add some salads and the way that they took in pickup orders. And then we're just looking at this guy, Caltor McLean, who has revitalized a whole block. $2 million investment. Now there's 3 mom and pop shops there. It's going to revitalize the entire area, because other stores in the area are inspired by what he's doing and what he has done, rather. So it's just looking at some of those things. We're talking about, of course, Mayor Wu's making it clear that she's going to run again. And we're also talking about the Blue Hub Capital story that continues to befuddle people, or they don't understand, or whatever. So we're having that discussion as well.
That's the alleged predatory lender that's misled, allegedly, homeowners who are trying to save their homes for foreclosure.
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the Attorney General with that next week.
Right. So the second half of the show is about Tupperware, because a lot of people don't know that Earl Tupper was from Massachusetts.
I didn't know that.
See, this is what I'm saying.
Mr.
Tupper designed Tupperware, and ahead of Thanksgiving, we know we need the good containers.
We do.
The Tupperware name has been used, ubiquitously for all kind of plastic storage containers. That is incorrect. He had a special design. It's made differently. We're doing it, of course, because Tupperware has just announced bankruptcy.
It's the father of the burp.
Yeah,
burping
that's
the
right.
container.
See, look, you know.
Women. My mother had a ton of Tupperware. Women could sell it. That was the way women had jobs.
Okay,
that's right.
Knowing you as I do,
Yes.
I would imagine you're well stocked in your Tupperware.
I have been. Yes, I have been. Yes,
okay.
yes.
Callie
So
has
it's a great
wonderful
story.
dishware. She has like 17 deviled egg plates.
I have a huge collection of egg plates, which were profiled in Chef Thomas Keller's Gourmet magazine.
There you go. There you go.
Scared of you.
Yes. Yes, she was the winner of the deviled egg cook-off here at GBH. She retired undefeated.
I did.
Callie, thank you.
Thank you, Callie. Good to see you.
Okay, bye.
We've been speaking with GBH's Callie Crossley. She's the host of Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, which airs Sundays on 89.7 at 6 p.m. You can also hear her Callie commentaries on Monday for GBH's Morning Edition. And she's co-host of the GBH's The Culture Show, which airs daily at 2 o'clock, live today for the Week in Review at BPL. After a quick break, Live Music Friday is back. This week we have local, longtime songstress Franc Graham, who just released her love letter song to the city of Boston. She's going to perform it for us live and talk about songwriting, old Boston haunts, and much, much more. That's next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, Ding Dong, the sing-along is dead. AMC Theaters issues a strict warning to Wicked fans. No singing, no wailing. But there is something to sing about and a place to do it. The Charlestown Rehearsal Studios, a practice space for hundreds of local musicians, will stay operational. And the ICA names its new director. We take on that and more on The Culture Show's Week in Review, today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and the Museum of Science, where their Fun for All Ages seasonal exhibit is now open. All Aboard Trains at Science Park features more trains, activities, and magic. More at mos.org. And New England Botanic Garden at Tower Hill, presenting Nightlights, a celebration of the season with dazzling light displays and festive activities for all ages. November 23rd to January 5th. nebg.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. Andrea Cabral is in for Jim Browdy, who has COVID. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and broadcasting at the Boston Public Library. So we're so excited about this. It is time for Live Music Friday on Boston Public Radio. And her latest single, Boston's own Franc Graham, is celebrating the city we love so dearly in spite of, or in some cases because of, the grit, the grime, the thriving community of scummy, overcharging landlords. All of that notwithstanding. She's here with us in the building along with her Franc Graham Band. If you want to catch them live, they're about to perform, or you can check out their show on Saturday, January 4th at the Great Square Route in Roslindale, and you can find their music streaming or by going to francgraham.com. That's Frank with a F-R-A-N-C. And now we're going to hear their great song, Boston.
In the back of some pickup on 93, summer night lights in my pretty city. We had wind in our hair and a sky full of sea. To a party where we didn't know anybody, really. Back to the plow for some treater raid. You know, it still felt early on a Saturday night. Battle cry, 2 a.m. tea and maybe high five. Oh yeah, all those years when my city, it was still here. To that broken, busted town, I bow down. All you can eat at the downtown cafe, and the sweet Charles River later that very same day. Meet me at Nuggets and we'll go to the ride. Late night deli house, fries and a frap. Morning peaches, said the old man in Dudley Square.
Hey man, what you doing? Get the beach.
Under the railroad tracks when the tracks were still there. We figured it out, we had time to think. Rock and rent control and a tub for a sink. Oh yeah, all those years when my city was apartment for the very first time, and this creepy landlord, but he died. There was no Zachem Bridge, just a Sitco sign, and Kenmore had an edge, and Mr. Butch rode by. The garden in Villa Victoria. My best friend John, he can tell the story. Yeah, we slept well and we hoofed it up 4 flights, 'cause there were boys to love and there were boys to like. Goth kids, they were coming out of Man Ray, and we had Chet's and the Channel and the Bat Cave. Bunny and the 1369 and the Orson Welles and Jumpin' Jack Flash. Who lit those fires? And it's all for you. And it's all for you. And it's all for you. Down, 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 about down, down. Woo. Down, 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 about down, down. Down, 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 about down, down. Down, 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 about down, down.
They are going to be at a show on Saturday, January 4th at the Square Root in Rosendale. Pacey and Frank are going to come over and sit down with us and tell us all about the band. They are on their way. In her latest single, that was Boston, that we just heard, the latest single, which touched on a lot of places that a lot of us who've been around here for decades remember very, very well, including the Rat. Remember the Rat up in Kenmore Square?
Absolutely.
The Rat Skeller, that, yeah, when there was no Zachem Bridge and only the Sitco sign.
No, it
Can
really
you hear
is.
okay? You're all right?
I can't hear my head.
Oh, you might have to turn it up a little bit down there. See the little volume thing? But Frank, tell us about the band.
Oh, thanks, Marjorie. It's so fun to be here. I love that we're in a library. So we've been playing for many decades. I won't name how many. And we're generally a 5-piece. Today we have the wonderful Eric Brosius sitting in for Chris Rival, who's been with me since the beginning and produced everything we've done. A little bit of magic sauce. Eric is also amazing. He's from the band Tribe back in the 80s and 90s. And he's doing all kinds of other great stuff now, too. And then we've got Taurus Fiscus on drums, who's been with us for quite a long time as well, all the way up from the Vineyard. Also in a great band called the Blue Ribbons. But I think I'm the favorite. And Ricky G, or Richard Gates, over here on bass, who's hailing from JP and also in 100 bands, but again, I think we're his favorite. And this is Pacey, who is also, we'll talk more about what he does, but he's been a really...
In for a while.
He's been in for a while.
Yeah,
and a good weird part. He's a weird part of the band that I love so
Samples,
much. Yeah.
sound effects, harmonica as an organ
Very
or something.
nice.
I'm not sure what.
We've got fans texting us. There's a fan that's watching this on YouTube or streaming. Says, I think BPR played the Boston song at the end of a show a while back, and I liked it so much I Shazammed it and saved it to Spotify.
Oh,
Glad
nice.
they're playing live. This fan is very happy. And another one of your fans is saying, all these old Boston call-outs are giving me goosebumps. It did for me.
Yeah.
And I saw all those places, because I've been here since 77. I came here to go to Boston College.
There you go.
I see all these places and go, oh, the thing, some of the things you did, some of the places you went that you would never tell anybody about now. But talk to us about the uniqueness of this band. I have to tell you, I'm relatively new to your music. I love the sultriness of the lyrics and how accessible they are and how seamlessly you guys play. So talk to us about being together for a long time and how that creates that kind of experience for a listener or a fan.
Yeah, it's a bit like an old shoe, isn't it?
Yeah, but you never throw those old shoes away, and you always want to wear them.
I got mine on. They're always your favorite.
That's right.
That's
right.
I think, just the way we work together is very organic. We sort of see what feels right. These guys never rehearse with me unless it's a big thing, a big show, or when we're in the studio, which we are right now. So it's an organic process, I think. I bring the songs, and then they do amazing stuff around it. And I want to hand it over to Pacey because there's a piece that he adds that does change. Today we're a little stripped down, but he used to play records in the band.
Right.
And so there's a bent thing that adds to the swampiness, I think.
Basically, Frank brings the tune, and then we kind of work around it. Our whole theory is just Frank is good by herself, and we just kind of provide the window dressing and the support. She doesn't like that, but I think that's right. That's basically right. So we're supporting her, but I brought in a lot of sound effects and samples. I was playing records and clubs and being a little bit of a turntablist, and I found that all the sounds were kind of hip hop sounds, fresh and 1, 2, and all these things. And I decided I'm going to make it more like an instrument. So I went and found sounds that actually were in key with the songs, like DJs do sometimes. But then I would bring the records and actually play along with the band, sort of scratching records in the clubs.
Oh, wow.
So that's how this whole thing started. It was sort of like the first, I may be wrong, but we were one of the first live bands to have a turntablist in the 90s. We did that in like 98.
That's great.
So Club Delft has been doing that for a while, but a very different kind of vibe. This is like, roots music with turntables.
And then at some point we couldn't carry all the records and the turntables and everything, and then carry them home at 2 a.m. So he's morphed what he's doing, and like today I just brought the harp to play a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, but then
did I hear it a little on Swim and My Old Boyfriend? There was maybe not My Old Boyfriend.
Listen to You.
Oh, which I really
Yes.
like. But Swim, did you do a little bit of that on Swim?
Yeah, so I do a little bit of looping and stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
I've got a very slowed down kind of clave loop in there.
Yeah.
Listen to you with the ears.
Yeah.
How about this?
It's very
the music show too.
Was a musician.
I love
Well, there
that.
you go. So so sometimes loops. This one we did very differently because normally it's Frank that brings it in and then the band kind of plays around it. But this time we were kind of in more of a produce in the studio mode. So I did the beat, and then Chris Rival kind of did his magic in the studio.
It's a 5-minute song. I write 2-minute songs, as you'll hear next, generally, and everybody's like, play another verse. But this was a 5-minute song, and I was like, it needs to be that long. And so he wrote the loop, and then Chris producing it gave it the shape that it needed.
And why now? Why write about Boston? I mean, obviously you've been here for years.
Yeah.
Yes, I know, and it's so funny. It's not typically what I write about. I'm not a topical writer, but it just came about. I wrote it about a year ago, and I think, as my husband said, he's like, we're driving around Cambridge. He's like, It's a Wonderful Life. Enough, but that's where the tasty. And I think I just. I'm seeing it, I'm living it from being here this long, but also it's hard to get a gig, like a small band.
Yeah.
Still, there's the big venues, but a lot of the small haunts and the great dives are gone. And they were coming to me, and that song just kind of fell out.
Yeah, because you spent a lot of time with the Plow and the Stars, which is still around, but a lot of them are gone. And we've heard this a lot from Will Daly, who's come on our show from time to time, talks about how these big venues like the MGM and stuff that's down near where our studio is in GBH make it harder. Why? Explain that.
You explain it, Pace.
I mean, I think it just there's not enough smaller venues, 400, 500 person, like the Middle East downstairs size venues.
But she's saying why, and it's because...
Well, it's just the economics don't work out. I mean, it's hard to make money. The rents are up, so the commercial music business in venues is tough, and so you got to be really big and focused on the national acts and 20,000, 10,000 people. 500 people in a club is tough. I mean, you got to be able to pack those out. And we were just talking, a lot of us have been in bands since way back. And back in the 80s and 90s, you could have a Tribe and a Think Tree, bands like that could really sell out a 600, 700, 800 person club. And that's just, I don't know if that's happening right now. I'm not sure.
But it used to be the college students that would be the backbone of that, like the Rathskeller and Are you still getting the audiences, but they're going to the bigger venues, or the audience is not turning out? No matter where the band is.
I think it's both. I'm not a historian or a sociologist, but I think this was happening. Kids weren't going out as much. They're doing different things. They're on their phones. And then COVID happened. And I bet somebody wrote a book about this probably by now, that it's a real shift in how people are spending their time and their money. And I love that you guys are supporting it right here. I mean, as much as you're doing.
Yep. Used to be house parties and things that are now much harder to do. They were never quite above board, but you can't really get away with those anymore. So it's multiple factors, like many of these things. You're talking about the teachers. It's not just one thing. It's many, many things, and it's all kind of a perfect storm, like a lot of the stuff we're dealing with. So
we're talking to Frank and Pacey from the Franc Graham Band. They've got a gig January 4th at the Square Root in Rosendale. Now, Frank, I understand you have a historic relationship with my co-host.
Not a relationship.
Mr. Browning. Well, Frank,
I'm glad you made that distinction.
I had to jump in.
Okay, sorry. You know each other from a previous effort in politics.
Yes.
What's the deal?
He ran the campaign for John T. O'Connor, who I wish was here. He died very tragically at age 46. I worked with John for years and years. He started the National Toxics Campaign. He worked with Jesse Jackson. He was an amazing activist and organizer. And he ran for Congress for Joe Kennedy's seat back in, I forget what year. I think I wrote it down so I wouldn't remember.
2000.
So I wouldn't forget. And Jim walked in one day, and I saw, as I was saying to these guys earlier, I saw a lot of people. John wanted to help everybody. So there was brilliant people, and there was all kind of, it was a colorful cast. And Jim came in, and he was like, "What do you think, Frankie?" After we sat down with him, I was like, "Hire him." Yes, definitely. Mm-hmm. And so,
what was it that knocked your socks off there?
Well, I don't know if he knocked my socks off.
He didn't knock your socks.
I love her. I'm kidding.
Absolutely love her.
I'm kidding.
Okay.
I'm just ribbing Jim because he's not here.
That's right.
He was so smart and articulate, and it was just, he made sense, and we needed somebody to run that campaign and run it well.
That's what we say here, smart and articulate.
Makes sense. Yeah. So you've got some new music coming out. We only have a little bit of time before you go do the second show, but talk about that, and if you can, just a second or two about the challenge of writing music in these times.
Yeah. So we're in the studio. We have basics done for about 10 more songs, but we only had time to finish this one. And so I'm hoping we're going to have a release in the spring with the rest of the songs. It's a great body of work. Some of them I have been playing live for a year or two. That's how songwriting sometimes goes. By the time you get the money together and the time to record them. And so that we're looking forward to that coming out. And my process is very much like starts with the words and a groove. And I, not to be like self-effacing, but I play with like some of the best players in Boston, and they are able to elevate what I do. It just kind of happens. So that's a little bit about my process. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Terrific. Absolutely terrific.
We're going to hear another song.
Okay.
Swim.
Swim.
We're going to hear, okay.
So listen for the looping on Swim.
And this is, I'll just add, all these songs are available online. They're on my website. They're everywhere. So if you want any of them, stream them or buy them.
For fans, go to Spotify, get the songs.
Okay.
Go to the website.
We're going to hear Swim from the Franc Graham Band. And we want to mention again that they've got a show coming up Saturday, January 4th at Square Root in Rosendale. If you want to get more information, you go to francgraham.com. That's Frank with a C, Franc, Graham.com, francgraham.com. Here we go. We're just a couple of seconds away from Swim.
This is what I know. Break before the turn. Make the note low. Slow burn. You will hurt a little. You might hurt a lot. Keep it in the middle. Keep it on lock. Turned off and a heart tuned in. Rain coming down and you swim. You'll feel good too. You'll feel so free, floating on the blue, green blue sea. doesn't understand why I want it like that. Head turned off and heart tuned in. Rain coming down and you swim, swim.
That was the Franc Graham Band. You're going to talk them out, Andrea?
I am going to talk them out. Thank you so much for that. That was wonderful. We've been listening to the Franc Graham Band. Thanks to Frank and the gang for joining. If you want to catch them live, they have a show Saturday, January 4th at the Square Root in Roslindale. You can find Frank's music on streaming services or by going to francgraham.com. That's Frank, F-R-A-N-C. After a quick break, all day we've been asking you to text on the subject of aging, and boy, have you responded, and the hard lessons in humility we learn over time. We'll read some of our favorite texts from you in just a minute. Stay with us. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL.
Trusted. Local. News.
I'm Jeremy Siegel. Donna Summer was larger than life.
She did 3 consecutive double albums, and all 3 of them went platinum.
And the Queen of Disco is now immortalized in a mural that, fittingly, is also larger than life.
This, I think, is a 50-foot by 60-foot wall.
It runs along the side of Black Market in Nubian Square.
She comes from here, like we damn well should be celebrating her more.
Dedicated to what matters to you. GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Sullivan Tire and Auto Service, committed to serving New England for over 69 years, with over 100 locations across New England. From oil changes to computer diagnostics, their technicians can maintain your vehicle. SullivanTire.com. And the University of Massachusetts Amherst, the Commonwealth's flagship public university. Proud sponsor of Marketplace with Kai Risdall, weeknights from 6:30 to 7 on GBH 89.7. What matters to you?
Okay, we are back at Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. I don't know what's wrong with me today. I'm over talking to people, and I forget that I have to come back here.
You were chatting.
I was chatting away with the Franc Graham Band members and forgetting my duties. But anyway, here's the deal. We have been soliciting your texts all day long on the subject of aging, inspired by a great piece in the Boston Globe by Beth Teitel. So our question: at what age do you just embrace that your knees, your joints, your back, your face, your hair, everything is going? They don't work like they used to do. Is there an acceptable moment to say, okay, that's it, I give up? Or do you opt instead to exist in a constant state of bodily home improvement? Andrea, what do the texters have to say?
Okay, so I'll tell you that in a minute, but I just want to say, right on point, when the show started at 11 o'clock today, I was supposed to be in a stretching clinic. I go to a stretching clinic. It's this place called Limber in Newton, and I couldn't because I agreed to sit in for Jim today. So
there you go.
At my age, I'm like having somebody stretch me out because you wake up every morning with a different ache and pain.
Do you go on one of those upside down things where you hang by your feet from the ceiling?
No, I don't have an inversion machine, no.
Okay.
But we got a lot of texts on this, and our anonymous texter says, I follow a vegetarian diet. I get up from my desk every half hour to do laps. She said, and I love my gray hair. Dyeing it made it so unhealthy. Kay in Sudbury said, it's a balancing act for sure. My morning stay in shape exercises and PT take a couple of hours. After that, I'm ready for a wee lie down. but it's really gratitude, empathy, and a sense of humor that keep me rolling in good shape through my 70s. Jasper from Framingham says, rushing to be at peace with myself as is rough enough. Add in the aging piece and it just increases my agony. I am certain that I am not alone on this particular ship.
Well, Beth Teitel, who's really a talented writer, I just love her stuff, is talking about the amount of time people have to spend on these foam rollers every day because they have tight fascia, F-A-S-C-I-A. I don't even know what those are. What do you know what fascias are?
Oh, I know it's not a muscle and it's not a tendon, but it's something that you need to stretch.
It's something that gets tight.
Connective
tissue. Thank you very much, Zoe, who told us what that is. Apparently, toe yoga, I hadn't heard about toe yoga. That's really big. And there's this muscle called the piriformis, Piriformis, a teeny tiny muscle located deep in the buttocks, or buttocks, I'm never sure how you say that, one or the other, that this woman says she never really knew she had, but working out her piriformis is part of her daily routine and her self-care regime. And then they talk a lot about, the fact that people's hips and knees go, and their pelvic floors go, and your cervical spine goes as well. So I guess it's a rough road ahead. That's all I can say, Andrea.
Well, older people are probably saying, back in my day, if you just caught a cold and died, or got diarrhea and died. You didn't do all of this stuff to stay alive. But people are looking to stay alive for a lot longer. Papa Jack in Hampton, New Hampshire says, I'm 69 years old. I have a gym membership. I'm not afraid to use it daily. He says, yes, I creak and I crack all over, but I still run 5 and 10K races, including a 4-miler in Nashua on Sunday. I will not go gentle into that good night. So Papa Jack is not going quietly.
Okay, listen to our young staff members who apparently are all falling apart. Zoe says, in my early 30s, I would pay good money to be drawn and quartered if it would stretch out my spine. And then we have Nicole, who's only in her 20s, says, I know I'm aging because my back has been hurting at work recently from just sitting for hours. I used to sit for hours in school and never had an issue. And now at the ripe old age of 24, whatever she is, poor Nicole has back problems. So I guess it starts earlier and earlier.
No, it is. We thank you for all of your texts. A number of you weighed in, but most of you have a good attitude towards staying healthy and staying in shape. So we're with you, at least in spirit, if not actually doing all these exercises ourselves.
That's right.
That's all the time we have.
I'm going to investigate toe yoga.
You go right ahead. Let me know how that works out.
Okay.
Thank you, as always, for your calls and your texts after the 1 o'clock news. Ahead of Thanksgiving week, we're going to talk to Lindia Downey, who's the executive director at the Pine Street.
GBH member. You can access thousands of hours of PBS programs online with GBH Passport. If you're already a member, just register online today or become a member and sign up instantly at gbh.org/passport.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Direct Tire and Auto Service. The team members at Direct Tire want to thank all their clients for 48 years of business. Tires, brakes, and complete auto repair. Direct Tire and Auto Service. Not just service, customer service. And the Icon Museum and Study Center, where visitors can explore the fascinating beauty and deep spirituality of the art of the Eastern Christian world. Now on view, Printing Icons, Modern Process, Medieval Image. More at iconmuseum.org.
I'm reporter Esteban Bustillos, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
Complaining of first. We open the phone and text lines to ask, are you too meek to send food back when it's not quite right? Or do you send in the cavalry, post about it on social media, and try to get it fixed at all costs? That's all ahead. Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Senate confirmation scrutiny over President-elect Trump's new nominee for Attorney General turns to Pam Bondi. NPR's Ryan Lucas has details on Bondi's background.
She's a former attorney general for the state of Florida, the first woman to hold that position. During that time, unsuccessfully challenged the Affordable Care Act. Before that, she worked for nearly 2 decades as a local prosecutor in Florida. The president-elect said that as a prosecutor, Bondi was very tough on violent criminals. And as a state attorney general, he says that she worked to stop the flow of deadly drugs into Florida.
As Greg Myrie reports, Putin has been ramping up threats against Ukraine and the West in a series of recent moves.
Putin spoke on television after Russia fired an experimental ballistic missile into Ukraine, one that had not been used previously in the war. The Russian leader said this was a direct response to Ukrainian attacks earlier this week. That's when Ukraine fired American and British missiles into Russia for the first time. In a pointed warning to Ukraine's supporters, Putin said Russia is within its rights to hit the Western countries that supply those weapons. All this comes just days after Putin lowered the threshold for Russia to use nuclear weapons. He said they could now be employed if the country is facing a, quote, critical threat. Greg Myrie, NPR News, Washington.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 351 points, or more than 0.75%. This is NPR.
Good afternoon with the latest from the GBH.
Brigham and Women's Hospital. He says the situation could have been even worse if data had been compromised.
If it was a cyber event, we would have been down for a much longer period of time. I think this is just a good opportunity to remind everybody that we need comprehensive cybersecurity preparedness and response plans.
Landman says he thinks better multi-factor authentication, improved incident planning, and stronger cybersecurity requirements from vendors could help prepare Mass General Brigham for future problems. Sarah Betancourt, GBH News, 89.7.
According to the Nantucket Department of Natural Resources, there are more scallops in Nantucket Harbor now than at any time since 2012. That's when the island scallop fishermen brought in more than 18,000 bushels, far more than what fishermen have been caught in recent years. That's the good news. Now, the bad news is that there are approximately 75% fewer fishermen harvesting scallops. On Wednesday, the Nantucket Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board voted unanimously to increase the bay scallop bushel limit for commercial scallopers for the remainder of the 2024-25 season. 49 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for use in restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. This is NPR.
Welcome to hour number three of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Andrew Cabral, the former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety under her old boss, we just talked to him, Deval Patrick, is in today for Jim Browdy, who is recuperating from COVID. We hope he's back soon. We are going to be back at the Boston Public Library, with or without Jim, on Tuesday for another edition of Ask the Attorney General with Andrea Campbell. And Wednesday, we're going to be joined by the Boston Symphony Orchestra's Andres Nelsons. If you haven't heard him talk about music, it's almost like mystical. He's really an amazing man, so we're very excited about that. But with Thanksgiving around the corner, the great Pine Street Inn is preparing to dole out over 2,000 Thanksgiving meals to those who need them. That's more than 120 turkeys, 140 pounds of stuffing, 50 gallons of gravy, and of course, all the fixins, as we like to say. Here now to discuss the work and mission of Pine Street Inn, as well as some news of the day on housing and homelessness, is Lyndia Downey. She's the president and executive director of the Pine Street Inn, the region's largest shelter service provider for people experiencing homelessness. And I didn't realize until I read Yvonne Abraham in the Globe, you've been there for 40 years, Lyndia Downey.
It is so nice to see you. I haven't seen you in a little bit since I left public service, but Marjorie's absolutely right. Yvonne Abraham's column, she did the column in October, and I think that was the month that you were celebrating your 40th anniversary. I really commend this column. People, look it up and give it a read. I'd like you to reflect a little bit on these 40 years from that time that you borrowed a dress and rode a bike down to the Pine Street Inn to volunteer, yep, to where the Pine Street Inn is now, and also, if you can, Tell us about that. Some of the best lessons we learned at our parents' knee, that you learned a really seminal lesson about helping people from your father. So can you talk about that?
Sure.
And then tell us what's on the menu for Thanksgiving.
I absolutely will. Really, I've been executive director for 20 years, but my first 20 years really were doing lots of different things at Pine Street. And I went down to Pine Street. I had applied to law school. I needed a 6-month job. A friend of mine had been a volunteer and said they hire people for the holidays. And just coincidentally, I read an article about Paul Sullivan in the BC Alumni Magazine, and then I saw literally an ad in the Boston Globe for a 6-month job. Rode my bike down, applied for the job and got it, and was committed that in 6 months I was going back to school. And then the woman who hired me said, "Hey, there's another job, And I remember saying to my father, "I'm going to do it for 1 more year." And he was like, "That's good, because you need to, not just do this." And anyways, but, I said in the article that Pine Street grows on you, but what grows on you are the people, right? The guests, this board that has been phenomenal, and I call it a board completely without ego. They're there for the right reason. And the staff who get up every day and do really, really hard work. And I've been lucky to be able to grow and do lots of different things at Pine Street. I was born in Scotland and in Glasgow, which is a working class city. I would say it's a city that sticks up for the underdog, if I could kind of encapsulize. But, my father was a kid during the Second World War and lived through the Depression. My mother, a little bit younger, but she lived through it too. And I would listen to my father and my grandfather talk about those times and how people had to really come together and support each other. And if anything, my father was about the person who has the least was the person that you really had to show respect to. And a lot of lessons you don't realize when you're that young, that these are really important lessons that you carry with you.
Well,
Didn't somebody come to the door?
Yeah, my mother used to say my father would not only talk to the devil, but bring him home and invite him for dinner, because he was like, And when we first moved to Connecticut, there was a fellow that stayed upstairs in what would have been a rooming house way back. And there was a bar downstairs. It was my father's local where he played darts. And there was a guy there, his name was Johnny. And he was kind of, the town homeless person. He walked everywhere. He never had, I always remember, he always never had a good pair of shoes, no socks. And my mother would say to my father, "Why can't you buy him a good pair of shoes and some socks?" But my father would pick him up and give him a ride if he was going somewhere. He invited him home one Thanksgiving. I was a teenager, and I remember my father telling us he was coming for dinner, and I thought, oh my God, people, my friends who, where I really wanted to be cool are going to find out Johnny's at our house for Thanksgiving. And I remember the look on my face and my father giving me a look without saying anything around, "Look, you better figure this out. This is the right thing to do." And he was a lovely, lovely man and had a horrible, just a horrible set of luck in life, and was all alone. Lived upstairs in a room, worked in the bar. They paid him, not a lot. And my dad kind of watched out for him. And it was a really good lesson for me.
It is. It's a fabulous lesson to learn. And so I want to get to the sort of long-term vision you've had for Pine Street. But tell us first what's coming up on Thanksgiving. What can people expect?
So we'll serve about 2,000 meals, Thanksgiving breakfast, Thanksgiving lunch, and then dinner. We'll have a couple hundred volunteers helping us, not just Thanksgiving Day, but beforehand, cleaning and prepping. As Marjorie said, it's a major amount of work for us. In addition to everything else, it's about 1,000 pounds of mashed potatoes that are all made by hand. So volunteers are in literally peeling potatoes for us starting Monday, because we don't use packaged stuff. We really use as much fresh stuff as we can. And, it's the food, but really it is such a hard time to be homeless. If you have any place else to go, you're not going to be at Pine Street, and we know that, and people feel it. So a lot of it is not just about having a nice meal where people can sit and enjoy themselves. A lot of it's about bringing the volunteers in so people aren't feeling so lonely and without their families and friends. And so it's a nice day. I have to say, though, it's a heartbreaking day in a lot of ways, because the men and women really, really feel it. The place is pretty quiet and subdued, because I just think it hits home on the holidays in particular.
Are you fully stocked with volunteers, or could you still use more people?
No, I think we're pretty stocked. Believe it or not, we've had Thanksgiving volunteers that have been coming in for 20 years, literally.
Wow.
It's what they do. We've got our breakfast crew. They come in at 5 a.m., by the way. They're the
Wow.
heroes of the day. 5 a.m., they're with us Thanksgiving morning, helping to prepare breakfast and spend some time with the guests. And then folks helping us prep the food, and then the servers. So we've got a lot of longtime volunteers. They give up their day to be with us, and it's great.
And you have who's one of the Bruins? Who's the guy from the Bruins? And you got some elected officials.
Yeah.
Which is I always thought that's a good way to show the public that you really care. But who's the?
So Mayor Wu's coming. Chairman Michael Witz, our former state rep, who's been a huge help to us. Senator Markey. Our city councilor John Fitzgerald will be there, and Charlie McAvoy from the Bruins.
That's who it is.
And the Bruins bring the pies, by the way. So they're very welcome, because they bring really lovely pies.
So Lindy Downey, tell us, we have a new president-elect. Will the national politics change anything for Pine Street? Does Trump have a different vision on homelessness, or has he even addressed it?
Well, I think it's obviously become a national topic with a lot that is going on. And so, do I think there'll be some changes? Absolutely. Do we know what they are yet? We do not. We are trying to anticipate as much as we can. Hard to anticipate some of this stuff until you know. We're looking at some scenarios, but I can't imagine it's not going to change.
So one of the things that I find fascinating about Pine Street is the long-term vision, and being able to see what's on the horizon and plan for it. Talk specifically about how Pine Street is A, tackling homelessness in a really concrete way, and B, empowering people who are homeless to use their vote as their voice, so that when you get to a town that wants to ban homelessness or criminalize it, you can actually have an impact on their ability to do that.
Yeah, Andrea, I think when I first came to Pine Street, we really did shelter, right? You came in, and Paul Sullivan, who started Pine Street, used to call it 3 hots and a cot. That's really what we could do. 3 hots and a cot. That's what we could do. We could maybe get you some clean clothing, get you a shower. And the vision's really changed, I think, to be much more about housing. And even from the early days when we started doing housing, we've even shifted that to be housing first, which means we're going to get you into housing and then try and deal with all the things that brought you into homelessness. But that is really targeted to the folks who are homeless the longest. A lot of people are moving through shelter really quickly. We want to support them too. They're going to find housing somewhere else. They're maybe going to go back to friends or family. They're going to get a second job. They're going to get out of homelessness. It's the group that doesn't get out that we've in particular been focused on, because they're not going to get out any other way. We will this week actually be at 1,100 units of housing that we've either developed or done with a partner. And we started yesterday moving some people into 140 new units in Jamaica Plain, right on Washington Street. Those folks will be really lucky enough to have Thanksgiving at home this year and not in the shelter.
Yeah.
So we've made some good progress.
Andrew just mentioned the trend, which seems to be taking off, of making it illegal to be sleeping outside. This is going on around Massachusetts and around the country. So tell us about that, because when I said to you before we went on the air, if you had someplace else to go, you probably would not be sleeping on the street, or you might not want to be in a shelter. There might not be enough shelters. So I'm not clear about what you're supposed to do in these towns that have made this illegal.
Yeah, I think this is a soundbite, but very hard to implement in real practice. So in some, we are seeing an uptick in homelessness across the country. We're seeing an uptick in Greater Boston, and we're seeing an uptick in the gateway cities across the state. And the reaction has been, well, we're seeing people outside in encampments. We'll just tell them they can't do that anymore, and we'll fine them. And so then what happens? You're going to find someone, you're going to arrest them. Maybe they're going to show up in court. Maybe you're going to be able to find them. I mean, it's just going to be a lot of work for, I think, very little return. In Boston, basically what the Boston ordinance says, we have to give people 48 hours notice, and we have to offer them an alternative. They can choose not to take the alternative. For the most part in the winter, we will figure it out and we will get people in. But that's not true in every city across the Commonwealth. So if there is no alternative for people, what will they do? They'll move farther into someplace where they can't be seen. Maybe they'll move to the next town. And of course, our worry about that is you move one town over and they too are going to say, we'll have an ordinance. I just don't see it being enforceable. So you can do all the ordinances you want, but I don't you're not going to find people, who have no money. You really going to have a judge arrest someone and put him in jail for, when there's so many other things to worry about? I would hope not.
Judges, I think, are loath to be, on any end of the enforcement end of this. But to Marjorie's point, potential changes to the federal safety net programs, which everyone relies on in every state, under Trump are a reality. And also Pine Street is, capital among organizations for partnering with the services that are the wraparound services people need to stay housed. So it's the people you talk about who are chronically homeless have long-term problems that need the wraparound services that Pine Street doesn't. So how are you going to continue to manage that?
Yeah, I think obviously we're thinking about lots of different scenarios. I mean, one of the healthcare is paying for a portion of those support services. Some of it's private money, some of it's revenue coming out of the development, and so it's not one piece. But any of those pieces moves, and we're not going to be able to keep doing it because the money's kind of divvied up in those three pots. So I think it's going to be a challenge. I think one of the things we're going to keep an eye on is healthcare. People need healthcare for people who are trying to get stable and sober and go back to work. You want to keep them as stable as you can on their medication, going to the doctor, making sure they're staying healthy, and people need insurance to do that. So I think it's going to be a challenge for all of us, and I think in Massachusetts we're going to have to look at what other options do we have.
I remember reading a couple of years ago, and I'm sure it's even truer now, that places that have very high costs for housing have a big homelessness problem. And you mentioned that there are people that are just going to be there temporarily. They're not chronically homeless. I can see where, with apartments costing $2,000, $2,500, even if you get out of Boston, if you don't have a pretty good paying job, you can't afford that. So that's going to be some of the people you see, people that just got evicted or just can't afford an apartment.
Well, I think, to Andrea's earlier point, a lot of the rental subsidies coming from the federal government. We in Massachusetts are one of the few states, we have our own rental vouchers. But the bulk of the housing we're building, and lots of other people that are doing affordable housing, the operational subsidy is coming from the federal government in the form of a Section 8, goes to your local housing authority, and then we apply for those particular vouchers. Any cuts there is going to be devastating. And people think, those are for really low-income people. They are, but they're also for people making 80% of median, which is upwards of, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. So those vouchers go to people like that, too. And in an expensive market, you're going to see everybody get penalized on that.
So you see people that have full-time jobs that are staying at Pine Street?
Oh, we absolutely have people with full-time jobs. They lost their housing. Maybe they were doubled up. Interestingly, a lot of our folks were not primary tenants. They were living with someone else. They were living with a relative, and something happened. I just was talking to a guy. I hear this story more often than people would think. A guy who's upstairs in our training program. Took care of his mother, she lived in public housing. He moved in to take care of her. She passed away. He wasn't on the lease, lost the housing, and it was fast. He was out of there in a couple months. He didn't have time to find something else, and also he's not working he was working full time, quit his job to take care of his mother, and is now with us. So, but we absolutely have people working full time, but unless you're making good money, you're not going to get market rate in Boston. You have to be making, I think it's 40 or something. I don't even know what the number is anymore.
I think it's 70 grand for a one bedroom.
It's a really
that's
high
a lot
amount.
Of money.
We don't have people making that kind of money, Marjorie. I would say we have people making minimum wage or slightly above minimum that are working, but unless they get a second job, which some of them do, and then get a housing with a lot of other roommates, they're not going to be able to pay the rent.
We just had the Franc Graham Band in here. So Franc Graham, I got the name right, that were just entertaining us. And Frank played a song about Boston. And the Boston she was talking about was before Boston became so high-end. When you had rooming houses all over the place in Boston. The South End and even the Back Bay, where you could just rent a room. And that's obviously done.
Yeah, there's very few of those left. The few that were around, we tried to buy the ones that we knew about, frankly, to preserve them. When I first came to Pine Street, though, we could find the men and the women rooms. They weren't great, but we could, and we could help people with food and other incidentals. Can't do that anymore. There is no really cheap, kind of these small units that single people need. It's really, the market's gone. And also in Boston, I think I'm right that I think in most neighborhoods, lodging houses are a forbidden use. So even if you found one, you'd have to get zoning relief.
Right.
If you did any...
Which gets pushback from neighborhoods.
Exactly.
That's
So
big NIMBY. Yeah.
So even the few that are left, and there's not many, if you do any sizable rehab, which the older ones need, they wouldn't come up to code, frankly, without it. You can't. You got to go to the zoning board. You've got to get community support. So it's not, even that's not an easy process anymore.
So talk about a little bit about, and I think this has always been a big component of what Pine Street does. I don't want to say it's a non-concrete component like housing is. There's a house and you move into it, and meals and shelter. But there is this empowerment piece that you do that goes to the kind of stability you need for your personhood. Talk about getting people registered to vote and explaining to them why that is part and parcel of the stability they need.
So we started doing voter registration quite a few years ago, and the reason we started is that people kept telling us they couldn't vote. They didn't have a permanent address. They had been in jail. And there were so many, our guests had so many questions about it. And almost to a person, they would say to me, no, I can't register. And so we started doing voter registration drives as a way to really get at that whole issue of course, yes, you can vote. And there's really almost no one in Massachusetts that can't vote. So it's been an education process. We've been registering people usually around the presidential elections because we just get more interest. You know, we did it in October, this past month. We had, I think, 60 or 70 people come. We did it actually right here in the Back Bay at 140 Clarendon, and it was great. And it was nice to be able to talk to people and say, I haven't voted in a long time. I'm housed now. I'm going to vote. But we had people in the shelter that walked down to the polling stations right down the street. One of our houses in Jamaica Plain is a polling station, so we've said to the tenants there that you have absolutely no excuse. You just have to roll out of bed and walk downstairs to the community room, and you can vote. But it's a very hard thing when you're homeless to be thinking about the future and to be thinking about the policies that might have gotten you here, because you're so worried about today and you're so worried about getting out of shelter that it's part of thinking about becoming a citizen and a neighbor and getting your life back.
Linda, before you go, tell us a couple of stories about stories people have told you or things you've seen at Thanksgiving at Pine Street over the years.
Yeah, I think, as I said, Thanksgiving's a pretty tough day for people, and sometimes I run into people who say, I'm happy to be here, but I'm just heartbroken to not be with my family or friends, and there's a lot of guilt and a lot of shame for people. My first couple of years there, we had an older guy named John Bear, and he and I were kind of book buddies. And he was a reader, and I'd bring in my books, and he'd tell me what he was reading. And when John was sober, his family would come and pick it up for Thanksgiving. But if they come Thanksgiving morning and John had been drinking, they were like, John, you can't come home.
Yeah.
And I always remember that because it just, it was really hard for him. Hard. He was an older guy. He had started, he had a drinking problem a big part of his life, but finally it kind of came to the point where, he couldn't go home. And, he felt it, and it was heartbreaking. And it's not just that you lose all those physical things, to Andrew's point, it's that you lose all these connections, and that's the hardest part. And that's why Thanksgiving is so hard for people.
Have you ever had people come back who've made it out, been helped by Pine Street, and either come back to volunteer or to sort of cheerlead and pep talk some of the folks who were there saying, I was able to do it, and I can help you do it?
Well, a couple of people working in the kitchen were trainees in the training program. Now they work for us, and they're going to make Thanksgiving dinner.
It's fabulous.
So that's really lovely, but we do have people come back. Not everybody wants to come back, let's face it, right? People want to get on with their life, but we do. And we had a staff person for a long, long time who was on the street. He's since passed. He got sober at Bridgewater State Hospital and came back and worked for us for probably 15, 20 years easily. And he was the best, understood everything everybody was going through. And I miss him to this day because he brought something really unique.
That's great. That's fabulous.
Well, Lindy Downey, it's always great to talk to you, and congratulations, and thank you for all the great work you've done and for all those great
I'm so glad to see you just before the holidays.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We've been speaking with Lindy Downey. She's the president and executive director of the Pine Street Inn, the region's largest shelter and service provider for people experiencing homelessness. After a quick break, we're going to open up the phone and text lines. When a restaurant screws up your food order, what lengths do you go to set it straight? We will specifically not hear from Jim. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
It's olive harvest season in the West Bank, and this year, the UN has documented more than 100 attacks on Palestinian olive farmers by Israeli settlers.
It becomes like easy hunt for annexation and for more control of Israeli settlers and Israeli occupation on the land.
I'm Elsa Chang. We visit family olive groves on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Subaru of New England. This winter, you can explore New England in the all-wheel drive 2025 Subaru Outback. You can find your Subaru retailer at SubaruofNewEngland.com. And Central Square Theater, presenting Galileo's Daughter, exploring the letters between Galileo and his daughter Maria Celeste in a story of faith, forgiveness, and the cost of speaking the truth. Now playing. CentralSquareTheater.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Andrew Cabral is in for Jim Braude. We're going to be back here on Tuesday with another edition of Ask the Attorney General with Andrea Campbell. And on Wednesday, we're going to be joined by the music director of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, Andres Nelsons. We're very excited about both of those things. Okay. Everyone out there knows the experience of having a restaurant mess up your order. It's how you handle that situation that can say a lot about the person you are. So get this, the sheriff in Georgia is feeling the heat after he dispatched police deputies to a local Burger King for giving him the wrong Whopper order. It's being called Whoppergate on social media. So our question for the rest of the show is at 877-301-8970. When something goes wrong with your food order, either at Burger King or someplace else, do you say something? Do you try to get it corrected? Do you smile and tell the waitstaff person everything is great even when it's horrible? What is the proper response when your food comes in not as you hoped? And if you work in the food service industry, weigh in here too. Would you rather diners tell you when something's amiss instead of just posting about it on social media later? And what is the right and wrong way to get what you order? And perhaps most pressing here, my co-host today, Andrea Cabral, insists that during her time as sheriff of Suffolk County, she never once ordered police to investigate a botched Whopper order at the local Burger King. Is that correct,
I never
Andrea?
did. I mean, no, that's one of those things, especially in Massachusetts. They'd actually build stocks on the Boston Common to put you in if you do that as an elected official. The whole, do you know who I am kind of thing doesn't go over really well here.
Jim does that quite a bit, doesn't he?
Well, yeah, he does, but he's not elected, so.
That's right.
But I'll tell you, I am one of those people who I really don't complain. I mean, if it would have to be really bad. It would have to be like, there's a Band-Aid in my salad, a piece of somebody's finger.
God.
Then I would say something. But I can't stand onions. I don't like onions. I don't like peppers. There are certain things I don't want in my food. I every time say, no onions, no peppers. Nearly every time I get onions and peppers in my food, so I just sit there and I pick them out. I just am not the person to send stuff back or to complain unless it's something really, really a big deal. I just, like I said earlier today, I think about what would happen if every time I made a mistake in my job, which, all of my jobs fly under the radar somewhat, somebody said to me, you screwed that up. The fact that people have the kinds of jobs where people are going to notice that you've made a mistake and can say something about your business or you publicly, I just say people make mistakes. Yeah, I asked for no onions and I got onions, so is it going to kill me to pick them out? No, so I'm going to pick them out.
Okay, 877-301-8970. When is it okay to complain about your food? How do you complain about your food? Do you do what Andrea does, just pick out the onions, or do you make a big stink about it? You know, I've said before, I waited tables for a long time. I used to work at, it's now defunct, the Red Coach Grill. It was kind of...
Oh, I remember that. They had them in Rhode Island when I was
They had
growing
them in
up.
Rhode Island,
Yeah.
they had them in Massachusetts, they had them in Stanhope Street here in Boston. I worked at the one in Cape Cod for about 6 summers. And some people go out to harass the wait staff.
That is true.
That's what they
Or try
like
to get
do.
a free
That's what they
meal
like
by
to do. Try to get a
complaining.
free meal.
Yep.
So at the Red Coach Grill, we had a rule that if you ate 3/4 of your steak and then complained about it, you were not going to get another steak. You know what I mean? But if you just had a bite, I mean, oftentimes people will say, I wanted it medium rare, and this is well done.
Right.
That's legit. Or the other way around, they wanted it medium well, and it was medium rare, or something like that. But some people, they just want to give you a hard time. And the other thing is, not that, you know, this happens anymore, but sometimes when you're a waitress or wait staff, you're supposed to call them now, and someone complains about the food and you bring it back to the kitchen, sometimes the chefs do things they shouldn't do involving that food.
That's always a
in the kitchen.
possibility.
You know what I mean? The days when you used to be able to smoke, there was a guy, the sous chef, who used to just sprinkle his cigar
Yeah, you
ashes.
told me about that.
Yeah, so
awful.
put the cigar right on your food, and that was a terrible thing. But how do you complain about restaurant food? The number's 877-301-8970. They caught this sheriff, by the way, on the body camera, the Whopper order thing, because the 3 cops went to the Burger King and they saw him complaining about his wife's Whopper. Can you imagine?
First of all, it's a Whopper. I mean, I know they say you can have it your way at Burger King, but it's a Whopper. You know, expecting sort of, you know, white glove service on a Whopper, it's kind of a problem.
Yeah, it is kind of a problem. And Nicole, our staff member, told us when she used to work at Starbucks, people would get an order Ubered or DoorDash to them from Starbucks.
Right.
And then if there was something wrong, they would actually physically come back to the Starbucks to complain.
Yeah, my thing is, why didn't you go pick it up the first time? You had it delivered, and because you didn't want to have to go to the Starbucks, but you're willing to get
Yes,
up and go to the
that's
Starbucks
right.
to complain about it?
That's right. I think
Yeah.
some people, like I said, they come out to give the waitress or the waiter a very hard time.
But it's a real thing for these companies because bad, you know, reviews on Yelp and other
Oh, yeah, it
places
could put you out of
have
business.
real-world consequences. So wait staff do get in trouble when they're specifically complained about or service is complained about. People can lose their jobs over this stuff.
Okay, let us start with David in Boston. What do you think,
Hi, David?
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
So I've been working in the restaurant business since 37 years now.
Wow.
In my experience, it is far, far better. The way I've trained my employees is to always check back with the guest. And we prefer, if the guests were to complain, let us know what the problem is so we can fix it. And if that means comping their meal, whatever the case may be, rather than to leave hungry and go online and be angry.
Yeah.
And
Right.
sometimes guests don't want to actually complain. And a server will come up to me and say, look, clearly it's obvious they're not enjoying their meal. And I'll go discreetly over to the table, sometimes kneel down beside them and say, look, clearly we got this wrong. Please let us know what we can do to turn this around. We just don't want you leaving hungry. And more often than not at that point, the guest will turn around and say, okay, this is overcooked or whatever, and I'd like to return it.
David, thank you very
Thanks,
much. That's a
David.
great call. I think that's much more reasonable to tell the restaurant people that you're at. Now, many of our texters are upset because Jim goes out to dinner almost every night. You know, here's one that says, I wish Jim were there because he's a great advocate for the industry. A lot of us in restaurants know him or have had the pleasure of serving him. He's a gem who educates us all on service standards, an industry ally.
He's a total foodie, and he cooks and he bakes.
He's a total foodie. He knows everybody in the restaurant business, and he's traumatized because apparently, and Donna brings this up, how humiliating it is if you're out with somebody else and they start complaining and you're like mortified.
Yeah.
Jim is traumatized from his childhood because his father, who did not go to jail, that's what Jim says, but in any case, he was disbarred as an attorney, but his father would take him out to dinner when he was rolling high and still had some money as a lawyer, and I guess complain about everything. The water, the wait for the cocktails, the food. Jim is traumatized by that, and that's why he has to be very nice to everybody.
One of our texters just asked whether or not Jim sent that complimentary text himself. There is a natural suspicion. No, but I think it's probably true. I actually have a very good friend that really stopped being friends with one of her friends for some other reasons, but one among them was the way that this person treated waitstaff.
Well, sometimes they can be real. I have two friends from college, and they have a lot of allergies, not just one allergy.
Food allergy is different.
Food allergy is different, but sometimes you're a little suspicious about the long. When I've gone out with them, and I really don't do it much anymore because. And thank God they're far away so they can't hear me. They have a long typed list of all their allergies. You know, the onions, the bacon, the this, that. It's like 20 things long. She's got one and he's got one. And you know, it's a little bit much. They end up having like a slab of salmon with nothing on it, just plain, or like a baked potato. But can you imagine?
We'll just have lard.
Yeah, you know, sometimes you can get a little carried away. I know there are the food allergies are real. I know they're gluten-free, or they're allergic to peanuts, they're allergic to nuts or something, and everybody's going to have a hellish Thanksgiving because of this, because you got the gluten-free, you got the vegetarian, you got the lacto-vegetarian, you got the carnivore.
Can I have the spelt rolls, please?
Yeah. So sometimes it's a little bit much. Okay, I just shouldn't be making fun of the food allergy people. I'm not.
You're
They're
going to
real.
hear from them.
I'm going to hear from them. I know they're real, and I know that
Unless
they're terrible.
allergic to texting and phoning.
I almost killed somebody with a cashew. I didn't mean to do it. Didn't know she was allergic to cashews. Yeah, you know, I went to Whole Foods, got for the takeout, and a little cashew just slipped into the little rice pilaf. And I came home, she had the EpiPen. It was bad.
Good Lord.
I know, it was terrible. Gloucester, Thomas from Gloucester, thank you for calling.
Oh.
Hi.
First time, blah, blah, blah. Love you guys. You still got me? I got to turn it.
Yep, go ahead, Thomas. What's up?
All right. Well, I eat out every single day. I take my 90-year-old mother.
Wow.
We try various kinds of restaurants, either eat breakfast or lunch. And for me, it's a 50 shot. I never get upset. It's humorous to me. I always wonder what I'm going to get, and it's a surprise. And a lot of times, if it's so bad, then I'll go back, and they'll give me what I want, and then I keep what I already have because they're going to throw it out anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. Dano, thank you for the call, Thomas. Dano in Dudley says, this is actually kind of funny. A long time ago, I was going through the drive-thru at McDonald's with my friends. We paid and got our food, and then my friend stops the car a moment later, gets out of the car, walks into the McDonald's, comes back out and tells us that his cheeseburger had no burger in it. So he basically got like pickles and mustard and ketchup and maybe lettuce and nothing else.
Yeah, you got to take
that back.
Now, here's a logistical question. When you do get the wrong thing at the drive-thru, do you walk back to the drive-thru? I mean, I've tried to do that.
Like, what's the point of driving through if you got to go inside? Right.
That's right.
It's true.
No, I don't think they like it when you walk back to the drive-thru. You have to take your life in your hands there too. You might be run over, and the people behind are really ticked off that you come back to the drive-thru. But you never know. I think my advice is always to check the bag before you leave the drive-thru.
Right.
Make sure you actually did get the French fries and you did get a burger in your cheeseburger. I think that's a reasonable request.
Once you step on the gas and you leave, you get what you get. In the drive-thru.
My staff is making fun of me walking up to the drive-thru, but I have done it. I have done it because of my children. When I used to go a lot of these takeout places, they were very particular. They had to get the Happy Meal the right way and the right toy and all this kind of stuff. Boy, those were the days, man. I spent half my life in the drive-thru at McDonald's. Anyway, 877-301-8970. What do you think about the right way to return your food? Is this David from Gloucester?
David from Gloucester.
Hi, David.
Hi, David.
Yep, here I am. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I was in a rehearsal once with a lot of people, and I knew we were all going to go across the street to a Subway for lunch. So I ordered online, thinking I'd be way ahead of the game.
Oh, yeah.
And I got over there, and I was first in line, got my food, brought it back. I opened it up. I had ordered a BLT. What I got was a B. It was a sub roll with only bacon.
Wow.
No lettuce, no tomato, not even mayonnaise on the roll. It was just a B.
Yeah. But it was
what do you do with that? You go back.
Bacon. I would have just eaten the whole thing.
Lots of bacon.
Yeah, love bacon.
Yeah,
Who doesn't like bacon?
Nightmare.
Did you bring it back?
So I went. Yeah, I brought it. Of course, I had to bring it back. I couldn't eat that. And I said, "Tell me what's wrong with this sandwich." And the guy said, "Nothing." I said, "What do you mean nothing? It's a BLT." It's only a B. And he said, no, you have to order the lettuce and tomato. That's a side. That's an extra.
Are you
said, no,
serious?
it's in the name of the sandwich. Oh, my God. It was absolutely hilarious. The guy had no idea. That's the only food review I've ever written, and it wasn't very good, that's for sure.
Yeah, he sort of had that comment. I have to agree with you.
Yeah,
But ever since then, I call a BLT a B.
You know,
it's a B.
Speaking of bacon, David, you ever go to one of those restaurants? Where was the place that used to have the hors d'oeuvre that was just the bacon, a big roll ball of bacon? You could sit there all night long and eating the bacon. What? And then, bacon, it's an hors d'oeuvre. Was it I forget the name of the place. Was it I can't remember.
Somebody used to serve bacon like it was a blooming onion, like one of the...
Yeah, exactly like that. I mean, that's pretty good. And then once I went to a funeral in Tennessee. Callie knows about this because Callie's from Tennessee. And we're up there at the bar at the after party for the funeral. And they had log cabins made out of brown sugared bacon. And you just stood there at the bar, and you'd eat the windows, and you'd eat the roof, and you'd eat the whole thing. I mean, how can you complain about a sandwich full of bacon? You know what I mean?
I'll bet you don't remember the name of the person who died, but you remember that log cabin made of bacon.
I do remember his name. Everest O'Neill, actually, was a wonderful guy from Ireland. And he was looking down at me, and he liked bacon as well. So I was doing it. In his honor.
In tribute to him.
That's right. And down on the road, she says what I think is a very general thing. I said this before, but I'll say it again. Going out with somebody who starts really complaining and giving the wait staff a hard time, you just want to crawl underneath the table. It's really terrible.
And then the issue is, do you say something to your dinner companion, like, would you knock it off, or don't treat people like that? Or do you stay quiet about that because you're trying not to disrupt the dinner or the meal you're having? I'm
taking a lot of grief from the food allergy people. I do not think food allergies are funny. I just think some people can get carried away. The couple I went out with for dinner with a long list of all their allergies. First, the wife listed all her allergies, and the waiter's listening, And then the husband lists all his different allergies.
Double down on it.
Oh, double down. That's right. But there were like 20 allergies. And then, not only that, but they insisted upon getting one of those, what do you call the flutes when you have like the different kind of beers? Yeah. Then they had to have like each a flute with 4 different wines so they could taste the wines. I mean, it was the most embarrassing dinner I ever went to. It was illegal seafoods, by the way.
The allergic are going to be outside your house tonight protesting in Brookline.
That's right. Serenity in the car. What do you think, Serenity?
Hi, Serenity.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Excited to be on the air.
Okay.
So I am representing the allergy crew.
Oh, no. Let me have it, Serenity. It's your opportunity.
So my daughter is 13, and she has celiac disease, and she has some tree nut allergies. And we've been out a few times, and she has gotten glutened, as we say. And I spent the night with her many times in the bathroom where she is violently ill. And I always will call the next day to explain to the manager what happened. I'm always polite. I'm always polite to the wait staff and everybody. And they always say to me, I'm so sorry. We will send you a gift card. We will compensate. And they never do.
Oh.
And I have to say, it's very frustrating because we put a lot of trust in our servers to make sure that they're articulating what we need. And when it goes bad, it goes really bad.
Well, Serenity, I think sometimes people try to fool you. They'll tell you, like with bagels have a lot of gluten in them, right? They'll try to tell you it's a gluten-free bagel, and then it's not. That's really dastardly.
Yeah. And I will say the other thing, just as a side note too, my 13-year-old daughter does often get excluded because people don't want to have to deal with her allergies. So,
no, that's not fair.
That's terrible.
It's not fun. So think about that, Marjorie, when you don't want to hang out with people with allergies.
Well, I have to hang out with them because they're members of my family, so there's nothing I can do about it, Serenity. But the peanut allergy is really tough for kids because so many kids eat peanut butter, and I get that. You have to worry about if it's made in a factory that uses peanuts or doesn't use peanuts. And then the other one is some people they can eat peanuts, but they can't eat cashews or almonds or walnuts. We have a potpourri in my family, so I do try to be sympathetic. It's real. It's absolutely real, and you can die from a peanut allergy or a nut allergy. Your throat
Tim
closes
from
up?
Lowell, I think Tim from Lowell is going to be our cooler head that prevails. He says there are too many factors to list regarding whether or not one should offer feedback. However, one thing that remains true throughout is that it should be handled gracefully and with patience.
Oh, that's lovely.
Right.
That's
I think
lovely.
he means on both sides, whether you're the restaurant or the person who might be lodging a complaint.
Paul in Worcester says bacon is 2 of the 4 basic food groups.
It is.
Bacon makes everything better. Complaining about bacon is like complaining about sunshine.
Have you ever heard Jim Gaffigan? Jim Gaffigan does this entire thing about bacon.
He does?
That is, I think Jim Gaffigan's hilarious, but he does this, and he's absolutely right. Bacon is a food that you really can't find fault with.
Bacon, bacon, bacon. That's
Unless
my
you just
motto.
don't generally eat pork, but bacon is.
Now, our
pretty good.
staff is coming to my defense and saying that this is the point I'm trying to make. I guess I wasn't able to make it, so they're going to help me make it. People with actual allergies is one thing, but some people lump themselves in the allergy crew, and really what they have is a sensitivity or a preference. There are those sneak people that try to get under the radar.
You clearly are out to ferret out each and every one of them and bring them to justice.
That's
I
right.
understand.
Sarah in the car. What do you think, Sarah?
Hi, Sarah.
Yes, I was just earlier today. I went through a McDonald's. I wanted unsweetened iced tea, and I got it. You usually have to taste it because half the time they get it wrong, give you sweet. But this time, and I was gone from there by then. Tasted sour or bitter, like if if it had gone over or some chemicals had gotten into it. I threw it out and went and bought some at Burger King, but I don't know whether to go back and try to press on them that there's something wrong with their iced tea or not. So anyhow, I'm in a dilemma. I ate at that restaurant many times, and it never tasted this way before.
Well, Sarah, it could be. I mean, I told Marjorie before we went on the air, I once got food poisoning at a restaurant that I actually like. It was an event. It was actually a going away party for me, where I had to give remarks, and I was the only person that dipped a piece of the food into this particular sauce. Got food poisoning. Never asked for a refund. Didn't ask for a refund of all the money that was spent on the entire gathering. I simply went to them and said, I think you should check this sauce because I've just spent like hours in your bathroom. I have food poisoning, and then I crawled home. So, my threshold for complaining is probably, with regard to food, is probably way higher than most people's. But you're right, when you taste something like that, your instinct is to go, should I tell them? Because I'm not, I might get sick or somebody else might get sick.
Yeah, remember they had the big fight? There was a restaurant on Beacon Hill that somebody complained about, and it became a big brouhaha between the owner of the restaurant and the person who was complaining. Went back and forth, and it just got very, very
Well, with social
nasty.
media, things blow up like in an instant, unnecessarily.
And it's really awful if you do have a bad meal one night, to really trash a restaurant like that. We always talk about the tiny margins in the restaurant business. That you can't. It's really difficult to make a lot of money, and now that the tip wage thing went down, I think, because a lot of small restaurants were very concerned about they weren't going to be able to afford paying all the workers, although it was hard because you want the workers to get a living wage. But
I don't pay a lot of attention to restaurant reviews. I don't know how many other people do. I always think that it's a competitor putting bad reviews on the website so that fewer people go to your place, but I have a naturally suspicious mind. Let's talk to Walter from Swampscott.
You're not the only one. Hi, Walter.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good.
I just wanted to insert my 2 cents.
Go ahead.
I was, it was some time ago now, but I was at a white tablecloth restaurant having dinner, ordered hearts of romaine salad. The salad shows up, brown edges on the lettuce.
Ooh.
The waitress came over, and I just kind of pointed. She went back at the manager. The manager came over and tried to convince me it was red leaf romaine. and it was just, I just kept shaking my head, what nonsense is this? So I guess my point is there is pushback that comes from the wait staff. Not sure if it was appropriate in this case, but we had a good little tussle over a $7 salad.
I'm with you. That would be hard to eat.
Sometimes you want a fresh salad.
Yeah, that's awful. Walter, thank you for that.
Thanks for the
One
call,
of our
Walter.
staff members says he knows somebody who'd file complaints at restaurants just to get the free meals. The person might need better friends. And somebody else says people with food preferences have frankly ruined going out to eat for people like me with legitimate dietary restrictions. Restaurants really take celiac seriously anymore because so many folks will say they're gluten-free and then order a beer with their meal. Yeah, I guess there's gluten in beer because of the wheat,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Neil in the car, thank you for calling.
Hi, Neil.
Hello. I'm calling about an experience I had out in Iowa a few years ago. I was driving in the middle of the night, in the middle of a tornado, and I finally found a place that was open. I went in, got soaking wet, and they said, dining room's closed, go to the drive-in window. So I did. Opened the window, got soaked again. It was the same guy that was in the dining room.
Oh, God.
Gave him my order and went to pay. He said, you have to go to the pay window. So I went to the pay window. Got soaked again when I opened the window. Same guy.
Same guy. Same guy.
Same guy. Then
I love it.
I rolled up the window, drove back to the hotel about 30 miles away. Got to my room, got soaked getting into the hotel.
Oh, my goodness.
Opened the bag, a really soggy bag, and it was the wrong order, but it was a hat for a girl.
Oh, Neil.
you poor
I'm
thing.
sorry. I'm sorry. But that story is, I don't know if that's as good as Peg from Hopedale, who says she saw something moving in her salad, and it was a 3-inch long grasshopper. Oh.
They have to eat, too.
Yeah, she said, that's right, they were eating her salad.
Right,
She
right.
tried to dig in. But she said the restaurant was very nice when she complained about
Well,
it.
they should be.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, okay. And somebody else is saying that, well, never mind. Jared is here. Jared, what do? You probably never complain about your food and would never send it back because you're too nice of a guy.
I think Jared has a line that cannot be crossed. That's my feeling.
Oh,
About service?
Yes.
No, well, I will tell you, I never sent anything back because you have no idea what's happening back in the
That's
kitchen.
right.
I have seen way too many movies and heard way too many stories about what accoutrement might be added.
What about a Band-Aid or a piece of somebody's finger? Would you send it back?
Or a finger itself, yeah.
Or
maybe
an actual finger?
Maybe
Yeah.
I would, yeah. But I mean, if you get something with a little bug in it or something, I mean, that's what happens.
It's good protein, right? Good protein.
Kind of depends on the bug.
No.
If I think the bug came in on the lettuce, then maybe I won't say much. But if I think they got the bug picked itself up from the kitchen, that's a little different.
Jumped off the ceiling
Yeah,
or something.
yeah.
Or a tarantula, you win. Have you both sent stuff back? I mean,
I really don't say.
No.
But I've never had a Band-Aid, never had a finger, never had a bug.
no, I never had a finger either.
Yeah.
What about you, Marjorie?
I've sent back if I ordered something that was too rare when I used to order steak.
Oh, see, like I like rare, so that's fine.
Yeah, I sent it back. It needs to be cooked a little bit more. I don't like the blood on the table, but I can't
Should bring
really...
a George Foreman grill and whip that thing on the grill and do it yourself.
Cy Montgomery, who talks about animals all the time, is basically right. I used to love bacon. Now I feel too guilty to eat bacon. I used to like to eat meat. Now I'm too
Octopus?
guilty. Octopus.
Can't do that
I can't do
anymore
that
because of
anymore.
her.
She has these personal relationships. Chickens. I mean, she hugs the chickens and kisses the chickens. Now I can't even eat chicken.
Well, you can eat nuggets because they're not really chicken.
Okay, nuggets. Okay. Peanut butter. Peanut butter. That's what I eat. Jared, what's going on the show?
So we have our week in review show today.
Excellent.
And so we have some good news. We know there are space issues for artists here in Boston. One big one has just been saved for musicians. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about two big divas, Madonna and Cher. Cher just dropped part 1 of her memoir.
Yes.
And
it sounds great.
Well, it sounds great, and it sounds not great. It sounds like Sonny was just a terror to be married to.
That's right.
Yeah, but she survived
She
him.
left him in the dust.
She did.
Right.
There was a
because he was the less talented.
He was the
of
less
two.
talented. That's
Yeah.
right. It's like a Star is Born kind of thing,
Yeah,
right?
and he was so controlling of her too. Who knew that was happening?
And so jealous.
Everything, all the things.
Can't wait to read that.
And then the other diva is Madonna, who can't get her biopic launched. So she's trying to figure out how to do it.
Why not? Why can't she get it launched?
Because everybody's telling her it needs to be smaller, and she says, "I'm too big." So
Oh, no.
Right.
Oh, boy.
It wasn't Madonna. It was the films that got too small, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So, yeah, we have lots of fun things to talk about this week. And, of course, Andrea, you're wearing your green because it is Wicked-ator or Wicked Glad,
I really
whatever
can't wait
it
to
is.
see it. Yeah.
Are you seeing it this weekend?
Yeah, I probably won't see the Gladiator movie with it, but I don't know if I'll see it this weekend, but I really want to see it.
The Gladiator looks so gruesome.
I can't wait
Yeah,
to see it.
I have a high
seen it yet.
threshold for that stuff.
Okay.
So I'm fine with that.
Gladiator.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't you think? Have you seen the previews?
I haven't seen anything,
Oh, my
actually.
goodness. It's awful. Well, I shouldn't say it's awful.
Well,
if you
it
like
is about
gruesome
like
stuff,
the Colosseum, where
it's
the
about
whole point
Colosseum.
was you die.
You
when
want to go
to
see people torn apart in the Colosseum.
What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Standish Village in Dorchester's Lower Mills, providing assisted living residents with programs designed to help seniors stay sharp, social, and independent. Learn more at standishvillage.com/programs. Forest experts and disaster survivors discuss wildfires as the world prepares for an increasingly hotter and drier future. Don't miss Elemental, Reimagine Wildfires, tonight at 9 on GBH 44.
I'm reporter Marilyn Scherer, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, the running joke is that getting a liberal arts degree doesn't get you a job. Well, how's this for a punchline? At Boston University, you can no longer get a degree in the humanities. BU is suspending admissions for its PhD programs. From there, something to sing about. Charlestown Rehearsal Studios, home to hundreds of musicians, will stay open and operational. And something to not sing about, literally. AMC Theaters is warning moviegoers that singing along during the musical film Wicked is not allowed. Then is BU actually onto something? Do we really need degrees in the humanities when AI-generated poetry is preferable to works penned by people? Plus, if anyone out there still reads material written by real humans, assuming that Cher is real and not some diva deity, part 1 of her memoir dropped this week. That and more next on The Culture Show.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. A day after withdrawing his name from consideration for Attorney General, former Congressman Matt Gaetz says he has no plans to seek the House seat he vacated.
I'm still going to be in the fight, but it's going to be from a new perch. I do not intend to join the 119th Congress. There are a number of fantastic Floridians who've stepped up to run for my seat.
Gaetz, in an interview today with radio and podcast talk show host Charlie Kirk, after he was picked for AG, he resigned from the House, but Gaetz ended his pursuit of Senate confirmation amid debate over whether the public should see the findings of an ethics committee investigation into alleged sex trafficking and other offenses that Gaetz has denied. Within hours of Gaetz's withdrawal, President-elect Trump put forth former Florida AG Pam Bondi to head the Justice Department. The president of Mexico says her government is preparing for Trump to follow through on his pledge to carry out mass deportations from the U.S. once he returns to the White House. From member station KJZZ, Nina Kravinsky reports.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says her country is prepared to receive deportees if there are mass expulsions next year. But she says her first step is to show the incoming administration that immigrants from her country are an important part of the U.S. economy, and said that immigrants shouldn't be treated as criminals. Trump has promised deportation starting at the beginning of his new administration in January. He confirmed this week that he plans to declare a national emergency and use the military to carry out those deportations. According to the Pew Research Center, there are around 4 million unauthorized immigrants from Mexico in the U.S. For NPR News, I'm Nina Kravinsky in Hermosillo, Mexico.
The European Union's top diplomat says the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu would be enforced if he were to travel to Europe.
to connect to electric power onshore. It will still take years to get the system up and running. Chris Burrell, GBH News, 89.7.
Alice Brock, the Alice and Arlo Guthrie's Thanksgiving classic, Alice's Restaurant, has died. Her death was first announced by Guthrie through his record label Rising Sun Records. As well as being a restaurateur, Alice was an author and an artist who had been living for decades in Provincetown. Guthrie's 1967 anthem is an 18-minute story about a Thanksgiving visit to Alice, who lived in Stockbridge at Trinity Church at the time, while running the backroom restaurant better known as Alice's Restaurant. Alice Brock was 83. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Kauffman Foundation, providing access to opportunities that help people achieve financial stability, upward mobility, and economic prosperity regardless of race, gender, or geography. Kauffman.org.
Support for GBH comes from you and Mass General Brigham Health Plan with Medicare Advantage plans that combine comprehensive coverage, including prescription, dental, and vision connected to expert care. Plan details are at mgbadvantage.org. And the Museum of Printing in Haverhill, preserving the history of graphic communication from typewriters and presses to computers and copiers. Their expanded exhibit of rare and historic Bibles is now on view. More at museumofprinting.org.
Welcome to the Culture Show, live at the Boston Public Library. I'm Jared Bowen.
I'm Callie Crossley.
And I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. It's time for our Arts and Culture Week in Review. Here's what it sounded like.
Look at me, I'm a grad student. I'm 30 years old and I made $600 last year.
Bummer, don't make fun of grad students. They just made a terrible life choice.
So many bands get stuck in a rut, and I personally believe that the engine room for every band starts in the rehearsal room.
Okay, so apparently you're gonna be popular if you keep your mouth shut. At least that's what AMC wants you to do if you're headed to see Wicked this weekend. The idea is to let viewers hear Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. Not you, no offense.
The greatest temple Rome ever built. The Colosseum.
Airbnb has partnered with Paramount Pictures to give lucky guests a Gladiator 2 experience inside one of Italy's most popular and normal
audio button, as we mentioned, on PhD tracks in the humanities and social sciences. This includes studies in the classics, English, history of art and architecture, philosophy, and more. This sends a signal. It sends many signals, actually. Of course, the first is into culture. The second is what we're seeing about higher ed. But this is a major pause from Boston University. And there are many ways to parse this. One of the explanations that came out of the university is that they just had union negotiations with their grad students, whom they pay. This is, of course, over as long as 5 to 7 years, as long as it takes them to get their doctorate. And basically, they couldn't afford to do this. Other people are pointing out that Boston University has a $3.1 billion endowment, but we know the financial crises many higher ed institutions are facing. But this poses larger questions about the relevance of arts and culture and the humanities in our culture.
Well, it's they are very much relevant. So let's start there. But I think it poses the question about how expensive it is to train someone to be expert in these topics and to be able to pass it along. You know, we've had a conversation at this table about folks going to college who don't read books. I mean, that's scary enough. So if we lose the folks who have spent some time diving into this subject matter and are able to pass it on to their students who can then live it in the community, that's a huge loss culturally. And it doesn't support all the institutions that we love here, that we talk about. I mean, how can you appreciate all the stuff that's offered here in Boston in these fields if you don't know anything about it and if there are not people equipped to teach it?
Yeah, I mean, this is, on the one hand, I look at this and I say, this is troubling, right? You know, to a certain extent. On the other hand, I look at this and I say, I don't think it's breaking news to say, and I think if you talk to people top to bottom, the economics of going to college and graduating people is broken. Mm-hmm. Like our healthcare system, everybody agrees that's a broken economic system. So we cannot live in a world forever where we say it's broken and nobody is making what is going to be a controversial decision in some form or fashion to try to loosen this up and say maybe there's another way to do it. Now, if you look at Boston University, I mean, I think the reason this sort of surprised me a little bit because it's, we've seen those rumblings in this area, which has so many universities. You've seen some of these smaller universities close or shrink, but this is Boston University. It's a big university, and this is a pause button for 1 year at least right now, they say, and it's not, the students who are there in these programs will continue to take classes, but for at least 1 year, they will not accept new applications in the PhD programs in these disciplines. If it's just a 1 year pause and they do come out of this with a different model for doing this, maybe that's okay. I mean, people look at this and they say there's already a conversation among folks who are in PhD programs saying, listen, we continue to graduate people with PhDs in these programs and there are no jobs for them. Many of the people who go into PhD programs do it because they want to go into the academy and they want to teach and they want to share that knowledge and they want to move that forward. There's just, those jobs aren't there.
Well, so, as we say, there are many ways to look at this. Of course, I take the same track as Callie in that I hate to see that the arts and culture component of this are the first to go. So I reached out to a very beloved colleague of ours this morning, Kirk Carapezza, who of course has he covers higher education for GBH, has the great podcast College Uncovered. And he was pointing out that, Edgar, speaking of being unbroken, it's not even completely broken yet. He points out that this will happen in 2026 because that's when we see this steep decline in 18-year-olds because people stopped having as many children after 2008. He also pointed out that Delta State University in Mississippi eliminated its music department. We've seen this cuts happen in Arkansas State, the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, Youngstown State in Ohio, West Virginia universities have all made significant cutbacks, he's pointed out. And the significance here is that we're talking about rural institutions and there is an increasing divide because you have these higher education deserts because they don't have access. Here in Boston, BU cuts their program, maybe you can go to Harvard or MIT or anywhere else. That's not the case there. So this is a ripple effect being seen everywhere, and there is going to be an effect when we find out down the road that people aren't making this investment in the humanities. But yes, at the same time, it needs to be fixed because they do need to have jobs, as the Simpsons joked about, but it happens to be true that they don't have jobs coming out of this with good incomes.
And it is expensive to train. We should acknowledge that. That is absolutely a truth. Yeah.
I think it is a matter of this model, which has been the model for a generation plus, multiple generations we look at it. I think you got to continue. If you believe that we want to have a society where the arts, the culture, the humanities, where these are areas that people can learn, study, move forward, if it's not going to happen at every university, I think that's okay. But we've got to make sure it's still happening in some places, and also if it moves to outside of the university setting, if it has to, that's okay too. You've got to continue to fight the fight for saying, like, we believe these are fields worth studying, fields worth moving forward. And to me, it's sort of, if that happens in a university setting, that's great. But if it's not going to, you've got to find alternatives, and those who are expertise in this have to work to figure that out.
Well, again, we looked at our slice of the pie, which is the humanities, but again, you can learn so much more about this by going to Kirk's podcast, College Uncovered. Well, next, the bands play on. We have some good news now. Charlestown Rehearsal Studios will remain open and operational. This is something else we've talked about on the Culture Show. This is something else that cities across the country are facing. As you see major development in those cities, again, the arts take a background because developers see opportunity for building buildings that can have high-end condos or offices or biotech spaces we see here in the Boston area. But this is really a great story because many musicians have been displaced and they haven't necessarily had a voice as they've been displaced. That was not the case in Charlestown with the rehearsal studios, where as soon as word came that the building in which they've existed for more than 30 years, where you have some 700 musicians, they learned that their building had been sold and they had talks with the city, they had talks with the owner, and they get to stay.
Which I think is fabulous because I can do chapter and verses, I'm sure you two can as well, of all the places where they didn't get to stay. I'm thinking very specifically of the Piano Factory in the South End. There's a gallery there, but the artist space was taken over now by a high-end, I think it's a condo building now. And so When we talk about this, I think it's important for us to make it clear that it's not just a space that means something to the musicians or to the visual artists or whoever's in the space. It actually enhances, there are studies about this, the communal space around it. To have artists among us doing their thing really brings us up as a community. So it's really an investment that we all can share in and be excited about, because it's more than just they're in there having a space to record or rehearse.
And as in this case in particular, as many of the musicians have pointed out, it's an economic boon for the neighborhood as well. The alternative that was feared here was that these spaces, and this is part of a larger building, so this isn't the only thing happening in this building, but that the spaces where some 95 rooms that musicians had been using were going to be turned into storage spaces. And the musicians pointed out, listen, people maybe go to their storage unit once in a while. We as musicians come in here, then we go out and get coffee, or we go out and get drinks, or we get food before we come into the space. So there's an economic boon to this when you have 95 rooms worth of musicians coming in and out all the time who are spending money in that neighborhood because they're physically there. So that's kind of one. I mean, the other one here is I am always uplifted when I see this, because it shows there is a path when people talk to each other and listen to each other, right? Because there's a lot of, it would have been very easy for these owners, because one of the complications here was that despite the fact that this has been used for 30-some years as a rehearsal space, it's pretty clear it was never really zoned properly to be a rehearsal space.
Oh, that thing.
So not only did this new owner have to talk to these musicians and see the value in doing it.
And we should point out the owner is R.J. Kelly. To your point, that they're doing great things. Sorry to interrupt.
Not only did they have to buy into the fact that maybe it would be more economically viable for us if we turn it into storage space, but okay, we're with you. They also had to figure out with the city how to get it zoned. That's yet another hurdle that needed to be crossed, and they went for it.
Yes.
So, that's very good.
I absolutely agree.
And this is the second case of this happening, because we saw this happen with the Sound Museum too, where you had another group of musicians. This was in another part of town. I think it was Brighton.
It's right by our studios in Brighton, right?
And they've been temporarily housed on Morrissey Boulevard in Dorchester until their own permanent building, which will be owned. It has been gifted to the city, so ownership is there. It won't be sold out from under them, presumably, if the city has control, and the musicians have a say in this. So we are in a moment where the city is recognizing, too, the value of this, and we have protesters like the Art Stay Here Coalition, which is saying, look, we need to have this, because whenever I see these stories, and I see the displacement stories, I think of San Francisco.
Yes.
We've been there, we've read about it. This is the doom loop that they talk about it, when you have the soul of a city leak out of it, and then you see what it's become, which is it's not a fun place to be in downtown San Francisco anymore. In fact, you don't want to be there at all. And we don't want to see that happen here in Boston.
That's right.
Well, next, the ICA names its next director. She is Nora Burnett Abrams from the Museum of Contemporary Art, Denver. This is very, very significant, because Jill Medvedow has been leading the ICA, the Contemporary Art Museum here in Boston, for 26 years. She's the one who took it from former police station quarters up the street from us right now here at the Boston Public Library on Boylston Street to build an entirely new building, to create a permanent collection of hundreds of works, to distinguish itself both on the seafront but then in the nation as having a permanent collection, really focusing on women artists, something that hasn't been done that a lot of museums are trying to chase and catch up on. And so this is a major, major legacy. So a lot of people are wondering who would come in to take the place here. And as I mentioned, it is Nora Burnett Abrams from the Denver Contemporary Art Museum. So we're beginning to see this major shift in museum leadership.
I think it's fabulous. First of all, she sounds like somebody, based on what we know, who has been in an expansion mode, and also an expansion mode with the idea of how we, again, enhance the communal space around you. So, I mean, Jill has done a lot. So you don't want to mess that up. And then you want to add to it as well. I think it's really important to say that one of the things that I think that Jill managed to make happen was to make the ICA a destination place. You know, we talk a lot on this show about not just accessibility, but people feeling comfortable. And through a variety of programming, pretty constant. I mean, there's always feels like something's going on over there that someone can connect to. That has been a destination space, even though it's way out in many ways, not right in town. And that in of itself is gold. So you want to keep that going and keep the energy going. And I know some of the exhibits I've gone to there, you're just excited to go, particularly the ones, you mentioned it, Jared, that she's focused on about some significant women artists. So fabulous. I love this.
I mean, I think the other thing you can't say enough in terms of the legacy of Joe Mevidow is the fact that, it has been noted as this leadership change happens that that Nora Burnett Abrams is inheriting a healthy economic situation at the ICA, right? How many times are we on this show talking about the difficulty that all kinds of arts organizations are facing? The ICA is also facing those, and to be able that they are in a healthy economic situation right now is incredible. Like, what an incredible legacy, in addition to all of the other stuff, that it's also working from an economic standpoint. And it sounds like everybody's very excited about, this new director coming in. Sounds like she's a very talented curator, but also a very talented administrator, a people person, somebody who really knows art history. I mean, sounds good.
Well, two things stick out to me. One is that she is a curator, so she's somebody who's heavily invested in the content, which I think is very, very significant. So she's going to be mindful of what they're presenting in the museum and not just doing it for ticket sales' sake. Speaking of ticket sales, admission to her museum out in Denver is $5 after 5 p.m. We like to talk about accessibility. Yes. Jill certainly did that with the ICA too, in creating the watershed space across from the harbor, contemporary art space. It's free admission. Also free admission at the ICAs on some evenings, but also for teenagers. She was very focused and intent on that. So these are things that this new director already has, but at her previous space, again in Denver, by the way, she doesn't start until May 1st, and Jill will stay until March, that she's increased their endowment by 30%. She helped increase attendance by 200%. Yep. So what we're seeing already, it looks like remarkable things. And again, this is just the beginning of a lot of transition in Boston as we get used to new leadership at the BSO, the Huntington. There will be a new leader at the MFA at some point within the year because its director has announced he's stepping down. So I think it's exciting times to build on all the great work that our existing leaders have done.
And see which way they can take it.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, you're listening to our Arts and Culture Week in Review live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. Coming up, which will win over the box office, Glickid or The Wickiator? And was that a trick question? Stay tuned to find out. This is The Culture Show.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's art and culture programming.
Trusted. Local. News.
Station, this is Boston Public Radio. Do you hear us?
Got you loud and clear.
That is the voice of Sunita Williams. She's up in the International Space Station. What do you think you understand better about all of us who haven't been where you've been?
Earth. I think the one thing I really get from being up here is we take life a little too seriously on Earth.
Dedicated to what matters to you. GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And North Shore Music Theater. A Christmas Carol, the 35th anniversary production of the holiday musical, is on stage at Bill Haney's North Shore Music Theater from December 5th through 22nd. More at nsmt.org. And Samet's Blackstone Associates, providing brand-focused strategy, content, cross-media design, and fundraising support to help mission-driven organizations build and deepen relationships. More at sametz.com.
It's olive harvest season in the West Bank, and this year, the UN has documented more than 100 attacks on Palestinian olive farmers by Israeli settlers.
It becomes like easy hunt for annexation and for more control of Israeli settlers and Israeli occupation on the land.
I'm Elsa Chang. We visit family olive groves on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
To those who drowned me, take a message back from me. Tell them how I am defying gravity. I'm a flying high.
Well, yes, here goes Callie. And I will tell everybody, I learned backstage today that Edgar can sing as well. We're going to get that out of you soon. What? Welcome back to the Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen. Yeah, no, you made a mistake in telling us that, Edgar. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-hosts Callie, Crossley, and Edgar B. Herwick III. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, which, of course, we just heard is Wicked, Wickiator, Wicked Glad. It's time to enter the Wicked verse. So this is obviously a very big weekend. People started going to the theater last night. People are wearing the costumes. It's so great to have a moment like this, to have some fun and to have people so engaged as they look forward to this Wicked movie. This week we talked to Gregory Maguire. He's the author of Wicked, who started it all. And I asked him about what he felt it was like to see this all happen and know that it exists and knowing that it all started in his head.
And it certainly has surprised me. I made every attempt in writing that novel to present the public with something that was turgid and indigestible. I did not know that I'd be tweaking a little bit of chromosome on the double helix of popular culture. I really didn't anticipate that. And so everything that's happened since, including the book's own rise in popularity during the 8 years before the Broadway musical opened, has shocked no one more than my agent.
Well, I love that. You never tell that guy's a writer, right? Like, come on.
You're pretty excited, Callie. You were belting there.
Yeah. I'm definitely belting because we all want to be popular. It's not about the aptitude. It's about how you're viewed. Anyway, I'm all ready. But, there's a problem with my enjoying the singing.
Yes, I know, because this is part one.
Yes.
And it's 2.5 hours for one thing. So people have asked, well, where is it cutting off if you knew anything about the Broadway musical? It's at the intermission. So the end of this movie, which the entire play was 2 hours, but now just the first half is 2.5 hours. So that's it.
Well, and I can say before we get to you, Edgar, I've seen the movie. And it's really, really good. I think it is a little bloated, but I think people are going to be very, very excited, and there are some nice treats and surprises in there, and what a great cast. I say this thinking we're going to have a great moment, having seen it and knowing how happy fans of Wicked are going to be.
I was going to say, that's kind of, to me, that's the big thing. It's like, this is something that people are legitimately excited about. And that's just, like, that alone is exciting to me. It doesn't have to be the greatest movie ever made. It doesn't have to be the greatest adaptation of a Broadway musical in the history of movies. It is just, it is something that people love, that people are excited to go and do, that they're going to do together in theaters, that,
Well, it also drives the
But
economy.
they're not going to
Well, not everybody, because yesterday I asked John Waters about his love for the original Wicked Witch of the West, and here's what he had to say about the new version of Wicked.
They turned my childhood heroine into an ingenue who sings power ballads. Margaret Hamilton is rolling in her grave.
What made you love her so much?
Oh, it was the only time I was ever in drag once, because she was such a great villain, and she dressed well. She really wore comme des garçons when you look about it. And green skin was very punk, and she had great dialogues. I don't know why Dorothy ever wanted to go home when she could live with magic monkeys and gay lions. Why would she want to go back to a black and white farm with that dreary aunt who dressed badly?
So you can hear more of both those interviews with John Waters and Gregory Maguire on our podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Also, the people who are afraid of you singing along aren't very happy, and they issued the warning. So, Callie, I don't know how you're going to deal with this.
I think this to me is really interesting. AMC has banned singing. How they will enforce this, I do not know. Now, there are some screenings, some special screenings, where they're called sing-alongs, where you can go and do the full-throated thing with everybody else. But you have to be careful and pay attention to your ticket to make sure you don't end up in one camp and you want to be in the other one.
This is this is actually fairly smart and calculated. This is my theory anyway.
Yes. Okay, what's your theory?
Because the sing-alongs will not start until December 24th.
Well, for Universal. But AMC, I thought from the beginning, was going to allow some sing-alongs.
No.
Okay.
That's the thing. And so what I think is happening here is, right, the box office knows that certain films have repeat customers.
Yes, that's
This
right.
is exactly the kind of film that has repeat customers. And the idea that for the first month, you cannot sing along if you go see it. But if you go in month 2, you can sing along. So I think the bet here is people will go and see it, and then they will come back for a sing-along when the sing-alongs are available. That's, again, total theory.
But rabid fans already know the song, so that's going to be.
I'm not saying that they're going to learn it. It's a little extra incentive to see it a second time because you're not going to be allowed to sing the first time. Although the strangest thing I find, they say like in their like little statement before, like no singing, but also no flirting.
I don't
that's
know what that's
super
about.
weird.
Yeah.
No flirting? Yeah, it's like no talking, no cell phones, no singing, no flirting.
I don't even know what that means.
I don't know what that means
I
either.
know, that's really bizarre.
I want to know how they're going to carry people out who are singing.
Now
that's what I want to know.
Now Hollywood is telling us when we can flirt.
I want to know what's happening in theaters in the dark that they know
right?
flirting
no
is
flirting.
happening.
No flirting.
Well, of course, we've been talking a lot about Wicked, but it is not the only big film, as we were talking. It's Wicked Glad Weekend. Let's hear a bit from the trailer for the upcoming film Gladiator 2.
I remember that day. I never forgot it. That a slave could take revenge against an emperor.
Where were you born?
I don't know. I never knew a mother nor a father.
You will be my instrument.
Who are you?
Did you hear that crowd? The greatest temple Rome ever built. The Colosseum. Because this is what they believe in. Power.
So you could either have your singing pink witch, or you can have intestines on the floor and bloodied sandals. But
or you can have both.
Or you can have both.
both. Yeah.
I think this is pretty fun, actually.
Oh, it's going to do very well because it has Denzel in it for one thing. So, but I can't. That's not my cup of tea. I can't see the guts out
So
there.
you're not going to be going to the Colosseum and fighting like a gladiator,
No.
which is also causing kind of
tell
a
us
stir.
about this, Jared.
So this is interesting. So Airbnb has this promotion right now where you can go to the Colosseum and basically stage your own gladiator fight. It's for a select number of days. And a lot of people getting really upset in Italy saying you cannot turn our Colosseum into a theme park. And I have to say, why not? I actually,
Come on. This is tacky.
No, it is. Listen, the Colosseum is not a church. It's the Colosseum. What do you think was happening there a couple
I know,
thousand
but there's
years?
some
They were
history
doing exactly
there. Why do we have to do it? Do it outside
like
the Coliseum.
animal hunts and fake naval
sake.
battles and historic
P.S. It
reenactments.
happens every April out in Concord as a bunch of people get up dressed up in costume and turn
Exactly.
the North Bridge into a theme park.
Well, now that they're reenactors and they're following the history actually.
Well,
in
these
the
guys,
space.
these people
No,
are
they're
gonna dress up like gladiators, and they're gonna mock fight. That's what they're gonna do. That's what they're. I think this is cool. And then I got this vision, sort of, to think about what you're saying, Jared. Is like 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now, like Gillette Stadium being one of the few things like still available, and like people dressing up in like NFL like costumes and then like playing a touch football game, like that. But
Because
that's
it's
essentially what's
historical.
happening. But I'm all for it. I think it's cool. I mean, you're not going to break the Colosseum.
I don't know.
You know.
I just think it's
What?
tacky. Let me just say that it's tacky.
But it's okay on Patriots Day.
Those people are reenactors who are following the historic path. They're doing.
So the
These are
Colosseum,
just
they're
regular
reenactors
folks.
in training.
No, they are not. They're just regular
They're the
folks.
next generation of reenactors.
No. You people are just delusional.
All right, well, let's talk about people here because this is our next segment. Roses are red, violets are blue. Yes, it's a coup. Move over, humans. It's AI-generated poems that people value, including haiku.
Hey!
That is
Look
the
at
brilliance of our executive producer, Chelsea Mers.
So that was human written.
That was human written.
Yes.
Chelsea is not an AI bot for us. But what has happened here is there is a study. It was by the Scientific Review, I think. Do I have this correct? Scientific Reports, which polled 700 people. And they gave them poems by people like Shakespeare and Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson, T.S. Eliot. And then they gave them AI poets, and people responded more favorably to the AI poetry than they did to the actual poetry written by humans.
Well, and the reasons were, this is University of Pittsburgh, is that the humans responded to the words that they thought were more accessible for them. So we can argue that there may be some level of complexity to Lord Byron and Walt Whitman. You have to take a minute to think about it and go a little deeper. So, but there are poems by all of these people, I would say, that you could get right away. So it just depends on, what what people are exposed to. And in fact, one of the experts say she thought people were responding to what they thought poetry was supposed to be about. And I think that has a lot to do with it. So for me, I can appreciate all the ones that were in the actual test, but I also appreciate, my favorite poet is Lucille Clifton, who is very, very, very just to the point. Her most famous poem is called Homage to My Hips. These hips are big hips. They need space to move around in. They don't fit into little petty places. These hips are free hips. Now, you see, that would get picked by this group because that's right away. You get where she's going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think some reaction from specifically, people in the poetry world to this study is exactly the same. This does not surprise me at all that, in this study, I think it's key, when they did this study, they picked non-poetry experts to read this. So this is just kind of the general public. And I think that's right. I think the general public, who is not, necessarily studied in or trained, and you don't have to be studied in or trained very hard, but poetry is one of these things that we all kind of do when we're kids. We're encouraged to do when you're a kid. We like the sing-songy kind of simple, easy to understand, easy to digest in a simple moment kind of thing. And we sort of, many people freeze that in their head of what poetry is, right? And most people do not go on to understand or learn more about the complexity of this language and the breadth of what this language could be. I suspect if you did this study with people who do study poetry, even just a little bit, you don't have to have a PhD in poetry, but somebody who's taken a couple poetry classes, or just even without classes, just has been interested in it for a number of years. And I think they would more be able to distinguish between an AI poem and a poem written by a poet.
But to your point, the people who are learning about this to enable to teach it, those PhDs we talked about, there's fewer of them.
But again, I would say you don't have to go that far. I mean, I think we live in a time where certain things, information is so accessible. You can kind of go on to the internet, ask a question, and get like a very simple, quick answer to it. And in many ways, that's a very good thing. But I think the other thing is poetry is a language, like learning music or learning dance or learning any number of things that just... you don't have to have amazing aptitude for it. You don't have to study it for your whole life, but you will be rewarded by studying it little by little. And some of these things are more complex. They're a little bit deeper, and it just takes time to engage with it. And if you do, you will develop skills in that field.
Yes. Facts, I would say, but of course we're all humanities majors up here, so
yeah, exactly. And it just shows more of the power of AI. And by the way, Allen Ginsberg was the only of the poets that they put before people where they chose his work. So talking about entry points
instead of the AI
in his really interesting.
Interesting.
Well, you're listening to our Arts and Culture Week in Review live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. Coming up, Cher shares it all, or at least half of it, in her new memoir. That's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
Student loan forgiveness is a divisive topic.
It takes from those in the lower half and gives to the upper half.
It is not other people paying for their debt. Student loan borrowers are taxpayers too.
I'm Kurt Carapezza. On the College Uncovered podcast, we open up the books on student loans.
Students are completely don't care about the price at all because somebody else is paying.
It would have been great if I would have had enough income to pay off my loans.
Listen to College Uncovered wherever you get your podcast.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And the University of New England, offering undergraduate and graduate programs in Portland, Maine, on the ocean in Biddeford, Maine, in Morocco, and online. The University of New England, une.edu. And the Museum of Science, where their Fun for All Ages seasonal exhibit is now open. All aboard Trains at Science Park features more trains, activities, and magic. More at mos.org.
flying in and out of Lebanon while Israel and Hezbollah are fighting is too dangerous for most commercial airlines, but one carrier is still operating there.
Middle East Airlines is beyond a flag carrier. It has a national role in keeping Lebanon connected with the rest of the world.
Flight safety in a war zone, next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Welcome back to The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-hosts Callie Crossley and Edgar B. Herwick III. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, which includes Madonna, who is like a virgin when it comes to making a biopic, because she is struggling to make it her own in this very first foray. She has been, as she talked about this week, in the process of making her own biopic. She will tell her own story.
Which is like the most Madonna thing ever.
Yes, it is. Yep. She will tell her own story, thank you very much, by directing it and working alongside a writer. But she's been working on this for 4 years, and now she wants this to be Madonna-like, which means big, larger than life. As she has said, I didn't have a normal life, so I can't make this in a normal way. But that is not what the studios have told her, which is you need to downscale and think small. Madonna didn't take kindly to that.
No, she didn't. And probably because, we spent a lot of energy this past summer on both the Beyonce and the Taylor Swift tour. But Madonna's appearance overseas had the largest numbers of anybody.
Yeah.
And, that kind of flew under the radar a little bit. So I'm sure she's feeling like, hello, I'm drawing people, everywhere. I've done this before. She's directed 2 films. Now, the critics didn't think they were so good, but she does have a sense of how to direct, and she's telling a story she knows very well. So no wonder I think she has a little bit of an attitude about not being received well.
Yeah, I mean, I said, I think this is like the most Madonna thing ever. And like with many things with Madonna, I find myself oscillating back and forth between rolling my eyes at her and having admiration for her. She has this ability to kind of capture both of those poles somehow. Because to your point, Callie, like, you're right. She has a point. I think, like, she is being underestimated right now. You do not get to where Madonna is by not listening to people who are underestimating you and saying, no, I think I got something here. I'm going for it. So, on that hand, I look at it and I say, like, yeah, go for it. If she can find the financing, if she can get it, like, go. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But, like, I can see why she's fighting for it. On the other hand, I'm like, you are making an auto-biopic. You are making a biopic about yourself. I already feel like we there are all of these, especially music, biopics now, of people who are still alive, which I find a little bit weird. And now it's like she's literally like, well, I'm going to make my own movie about me. But then I go back and I say, you have every right to do it, so go ahead, Madonna. So I keep going back and forth in my head with this.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to watch. So she may go to a series now, actually, because if she's told asked, she can't have a big film, she might just do a series. And people from Florence Pugh to Julia Garner from Ozark, she's been showing up with Madonna at concerts. So it looks like it'll definitely happen. But it's certainly fun to watch, and she will get it done. As she said, she's always fighting.
That's right.
If I could turn back time, if I could find a way, I'd take back those words that hurt you, and you'd stay.
All right, well, staying in the realm of biography, you'll need to turn back time if you want to read Cher's new memoir. Part 1 just dropped this week and literally landed with a thud at more than 400 pages. Of course, we haven't had time to read it, but it does sound really fascinating. She has had a really, really extraordinary and difficult life, as Part 1 would indicate. In her early years, she experienced so much, including being dumped in an orphanage, her mother getting her back, this very, very young relationship. She was, 13 years old when she met Sonny Bono, and he was in his late 20s, and then he controlled her life. There is a lot to this story I think maybe a lot of people didn't even realize.
Well, she's always interesting.
Yeah.
And the thing that we can count on with her is that she's going to be frank about it. So I'm already, from the dribs and drabs I've heard already, fascinated to see and all the other details that she has, including everybody wants to know about that relationship with Sonny Bono, as you know. My question is, what's with the two-parters? You know, Obama had part one. Everybody's got, you know, Wicked two-parters, Mission Impossible two-parters. Just put it in one book. Barbara showed you the way.
Well, how long was Barbara's book?
982, 1,000 if you could. But it went like this.
Even
It
the
was
Bible's
well
in
done.
two parts.
Yeah,
You know, you got
I'm
Old
telling
Testament, you got New Testament.
People who have not read Barbara Streisand's book, it is excellent. So Cher could have done the same thing.
I just finished it. I started listening to Barbara in April, and I just finished it.
Yeah.
Well, you had other things to do in between. It is an excellent book. So anyway, I think it's going to be fabulous.
Well, I mean,
She'll do well,
apparently
you know.
this, and maybe this is total nonsense because, you know, obviously there's economic reasons to make these things two parts. But in this case, it does sound legitimately like when the first draft kind of came through, Cher was basically like, this doesn't work for me, and let's split it into two parts so I can really get into the stuff, especially in this first one. I mean, what I find remarkable about this is everybody seems to love this, right? The New York Times, it sounds like, loved it. Slate loved it. Anybody you read review. And like when any of these new memoirs come out, right, you get a bunch of clickbait headlines that come up and you see the fun stuff about, like, you know, Cher called Lucille Ball when she was thinking about, you know, all that like kind of fun. You got like, I think Salvador Dali gets a mention. But despite the fact that all those headlines happened, when you read these reviews, what people are talking about is like, this is just like a great, gritty American story. Like this young woman who sort of comes from nothing, was, as you said, which was news to me. I didn't realize she grew up in an orphanage in Scranton, Pennsylvania, for a portion of her life. Just like this, you know, and she has this very authentic voice. You know, this was ghost written. She says herself she hasn't even really read the memoir as it is fully yet because she has dyslexia, and apparently just kind of like they do with these, she was interviewed, and it's her voice and it's her words, but the ghostwriter kind of shapes it.
Well, and as artists will tell you too, regurgitating all of this stuff, having to go back into your childhood and relive it and put it out there, and knowing that it's now out there permanently and everybody knows it, that's a lot to deal with too. Although I have to say, I'm really excited about part 2 already, because the New York Times, in profiling this and sitting down with her, pointed out that she doesn't know her address or her phone number, so I can't wait to learn when exactly Cher became Cher, if you know what I mean. Which is, you know, lots to admire there too, because when you're that successful, just own it.
You don't,
I have no idea where I live. I don't know how to. She said, "People find me."
Yeah,
I love that.
I mean, talk about making it. Like measures of how do you know when you made it when you don't even know your address. That's
I just
fantastic.
love the fact that she told Tina Turner, "Walk away."
Yeah,
I love that.
From Ike.
From Ike.
Yeah, from Ike. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, it's Friday, and that can only mean one thing.
It's time for Follow-Up Friday. Follow-Up Friday. Follow-Up Friday. Follow-Up Friday.
We've been having a lot of resolution to our stories recently, so we're each going to take one, but I'll start with, we talked a few weeks ago about Emily in Paris and how Lucas Bravo, who stars as Gabriel in the show, kind of was biting that, he was biting the hand.
Biting and chewing and swallowing the hand.
And then spitting it back out in front of what fed him. But he was complaining about how his character Gabriel was depicted in that show and saying he was basically, that character was turned into avocado. He's just this sad Eeyore-ish mush. Well, turns out it didn't bother them very much, and he's back because they're going to be starting to film season 5 in May in Paris and a little bit in Rome. So Emmanuel Macron is very happy too because it's staying in Paris largely, and Lucas Bravo is back.
What can I say?
I wonder if his character will be more interesting or not.
No, probably not, but I think if somebody told him, you better shut up and take the check. That's what I'm guessing.
What's yours, Callie?
Mine is Louisiana and the film tax credit. You know, I was a big a supporter of the film tax credit finally happening here in Massachusetts. GBH, in full transparency, does benefit from it. But, you know, it just does so much to lift up bringing in these movies. And as we've just heard here, now it's theater tax credit as well. So we got the whole thing. It does a lot. Louisiana, the tax credit stuff is centered. There's a college in Louisiana, in Shreveport, where there's a lot of filming activity happens that I went to speak at once. And everybody said to me, there's no food there. You're going to die. It's horrible. Well, it was like, oh, my God. It was chef stuff. You know why? Because all the movies had come there to film.
Yep.
So they just redid the town, the economic power of having that tax credit and bringing stuff in. So Louisiana is kind of a little bit biting the hand that feeds you, because people always have this idea about Hollywood taking too much, as we did here. And so they've revised the tax credit to put a cap on certain things, to limit what the filmmakers can get. They can't turn in the cash credit at the end, blah, blah, blah. But I think it'll still be something worthwhile for both for the economy and for all the people who showed up at the State House to say, hello, 10,000 jobs here in the state related to this. Please don't, cut this off.
And for you to have good food next time you visit to speak there.
That's exactly
right.
To put a cap on the live theater tax credit, when we talked about this last week, both the House and Senate had passed it. This week, the governor signed the bill, so the live theater tax credit, he is here to stay in Massachusetts after years of fighting for that. So that's the follow-up there. And Edgar, you have a follow-up on Rust and that horrible shooting on that set.
I mean, it's just, this is something we've been following for as long as we've been doing the culture show, really. And, obviously a very sad saga. Helena Hutchins, who was the cinematographer on this film Rust, with Alec Baldwin, gun goes off or the gun is fired, depending on who you ask. She, of course, lost her life. Well, the movie finally was seen by the public for the first time this week. So we talked, I think, a few weeks ago when it was announced that it was going to get a screening at this film festival in Poland, which is not too far from where Helena Hutchins is from. That part of the world, and was a film festival that was focused on cinematography. So the screening sold out. Helena Hutchins' mother came out this week also and said she wouldn't be attending it. Kind of again reiterated that she felt like Alec Baldwin has not been held to account to the level that he should. Of course, Helena Hutchins' husband has been one of the people. He came on as an executive producer after all of the drama, and he's been one of the people pushing for this movie to eventually come to light. So they had a minute of silence ahead of the screening. The screening happened. There's the one last sort of piece of this story I think that still exists is when it will see release in the United States, and that's still an open question. There's a studio that I think paid $2 million for distribution rights before the incident even happened. I think they still have it. They have said that they want to release it in the U.S., but still a question mark right now as to whether that's going to happen. But it did see the light of day for the first time this week.
Yeah, that's an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah.
Do you don't want to see it because you know what happened there, but you do want to see it to honor her? That's.
I think I would not go to the theater, but I think I'd wait for it to come to cable and then I'd look at it. But I'm not sure I could go to the theater.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that means it's time for our lightning round. These are the stories, the headlines that caught our attention this week. Callie, what's yours?
I'm so excited. There's a stamp in honor of Betty White.
That is so good.
I mean,
the stamp we didn't know we needed.
I know. She was just the greatest actress. The Golden Girls, the Mary Tyler Moore Show, Hot in Cleveland. I can watch The Proposal. That movie came out in 2009. If it's on, I will watch it. I've watched it 5,000 times. Anyway, she's fabulous in that. And they're honoring her. It'll come out in 2025. If you're a stamp collector, you can call and get on the pre-order or whatever so that you make sure that you get yours. But I think what a tremendous honor for somebody who was fabulous at her job and apparently by all who work with her, a great person to work with as well.
Well, she's fabulous. And I can tell you that Dale Stefanos is the artist
really
behind this. He is a local artist, and he's going to be on the Culture Show on December 10th.
Oh, amazing!
Talking about that. We'll thank him for being a friend.
Betty White is the best. I always say, if there was one couple that I could ever spend some time with, it would have been Betty White and Alan Ludden, who's a famous game show host, who was her husband, circa 72, 73, out in California, maybe a cocktail party at their house. That would be incredible.
Edgar, thank you for being a friend.
You're welcome, Callie.
All right, Edgar, what's the headline that caught your attention?
Well, I'm sure, this is not maybe necessarily news that came out this week. However, it is important as we head into next week, because next week, of course, is Thanksgiving. And this is the frozen to fantastic Butterball turkey. Has everybody seen this? So Butterball, famous for their turkeys. Obviously, they do 1 billion pounds of turkey sales a year or something like that. This year, they have, released this one, which apparently you can go right from the freezer into the oven with. So it's in some sort of a brine. They say you obviously have to add time to it. If the turkey's really big, you've got to add something like 12 hours of cooking time. But of course, thawing a frozen turkey, which butterballs are, also takes like days and days and days ahead of time. So this is supposed to be a little bit easier. There's a Food and Wine magazine article came out, I think 2 days ago, or maybe yesterday, where somebody who is a chef turned farmer who raises turkeys and also writes for magazines basically did a test this week. And they made the frozen one, they made a regular butterball that they thawed, simultaneously made them. The frozen one took 2 more hours to do, but she fed it to the family, and everybody preferred the non-frozen one. So
interesting.
Maybe a time save. I'll be interested to know if people. I'm going to see what the sales are on this on the back end. I'm interested.
Another follow-up Friday.
Yes.
Baked into the follow-up
Baked
Friday.
into the Friday. Yes.
Well, I'm going to stay with food too, actually.
Ooh, go on.
Because we have the story of the banana that was art.
Yes.
It is art, was art, who knows? I certainly have thoughts about this. But the conceptual artist Maurizio Catalan sold 3 versions of this in the 6 figures at Art Basel in Miami a couple of years ago. Well, his piece of art about the banana, which is basically you get instructions to tape a banana that had been bought. By the way, when it was auctioned this week, it was bought on the streets of New York for 35 cents.
Okay.
Then they used duct tape to put it up on a gallery wall, and it went for $6.2 million.
Unbelievable.
At Sotheby's by a crypto guy who bought it. And so, again, quote-unquote conceptual, I won't say quote-unquote, that's mean, but conceptual art and...
quote-unquote bought with quote-unquote money.
Right, exactly. Taking a jab at market speculation.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm going to suggest he wasn't taught by one of the PhDs that didn't get to appreciate what art is.
$6 million for that?
Okay,
whatever. That is a smart person in some form.
Well, that is all for... He's going to eat the banana, by the way, he said, because of course it's going to rot. They're not saving
Are they going to stream that live on Netflix?
Yeah,
and he's got $6 million coming his way for the live stream?
Smart. Okay.
Well, that is all for this edition of The Culture Show. You can tune in Monday for Stage and Screen with Culture Show contributor Joyce Kilhaywick. She has a roundup of the latest movies and plays on right now. Plus, our contributor Pedro Alonso joins us about his destination-worthy new exhibition in Mexico. A reminder that if you ever miss an episode, like my recent chats with the Indigo Girls, Wicked author Gregory Maguire, director John Waters, who didn't like that banana, or who does like the banana, by the way. He talked about that at an event last night. Or Oscar-winning actor Cillian Murphy, just download the Culture Show podcast wherever you get your podcast. Thanks today to the BPL technical and logistics crew, Maddie Geyer, Bill Francis, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Juan Jose Cadena, Chris Hanks, Pat Lally, and Olivia Corshio. Also thanks to City Table, the Lennox Hotel, and the News Feed Cafe. We will all be off next week, enjoying our Thanksgiving holiday.
Comas.
So happy Thanksgiving to everyone on behalf of all of us at the Culture Show, and then sell it. I'm Jared Bowen. Have an art-filled weekend.
Where's Mary? Where is she? Where is she? She's just about to close up the library.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Spend your afternoon with us. Stay with us for GBH's All Things Considered at 4 and Marketplace at 6:30. But first, the world. A global view of today's headlines from the World Newsroom, right here on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Dover Rug and Home. Rugs and carpeting for today's lifestyle with in-home rug trial and design consultation. Dover Rug in Natick, Boston, Burlington, and online at doverrug.com. Dover Rug. Rugs and the people who know them. The next Great Performances is full of crazy great talent. Experience the music of the legendary Patsy Cline with a star-studded tribute concert. Watch Patsy Cline Walkin' After Midnight, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
If you have a vehicle that no longer works for you, put it to work for GBH. When you donate before year's end, you could earn a possible tax advantage and you'll support the news you trust. We'll handle the safe and easy pickup, and your contribution will help strengthen the programs our community depends on for real news and smart